World whiskies. I think that term is a wee bit kind of almost rude and dismissive, right? I need to ask for forgiveness. It comes from me as a kind of Scotch whisky lover, and of course, someone who's based in Scotland as well. When I speak about world whiskies, probably it would be better to say something like non-Scotch, but that seems a wee bit clumsy too. What I'm speaking about is any kind of whiskey that's made, any kind of grain-made spirit, okay, that's known as whiskey that's made somewhere else in the world other than Scotland. And that's been a really, really fascinating thing to witness over the last couple of decades. It's incredible. We've got so much choice today. Some of it we can actually get here in the UK as well. I'm not speaking about things that you have to travel for. And as time goes on, the offering becomes more and more compelling. And the big thing about our community here, we don't recognize borders or geography or distance, right? We're connected digitally. So we're very vocal when we discover something that's good and interesting. And sometimes you guys are kind enough to gift that to me. Half of the whiskies I'm going to share tonight have been gifted to me by this very community. And I understand from all of you that all of the whiskies I'm going to share with you tonight, I should be paying attention to. I'll see you in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another Thursday night. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I've been scanning the chat, but there's a lot of you in tonight. There's well over 200 of you before I went live tonight. Fantastic to see the support. Usually it's a wee bit quieter when we go off the Scotch rails a wee bit, but obviously maybe not tonight. You're keen to hear about these really interesting whiskies I'm going to be talking about. But I want to open the stream tonight by saying, welcome to Scotland, Jimmy Legg. I don't know if you're going to be able to join in tonight. I don't know where you are, buddy. You're in accommodation, staying with friends and something or other. The irony is, of course, he's closer to the vPub than he's ever been in his life, and it might be the one that he doesn't attend. Actually, I've just spotted his name. He is here. So he's stealing somebody's broadband, stealing somebody's Wi-Fi or whatever in order to join us tonight. So it's fantastic. Jimmy landed yesterday. I did offer to go and pick him up, but that was already pre-arranged and things like that. So I haven't met the man yet. That momentous occurrence is still to happen. I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, welcome, Jimmy. I hope you're settling in well. I hope the jet lag isn't biting too hard. And welcome to the first ever GMT, I suppose, or British Time vPub that you've ever enjoyed. And I hope you do enjoy it. Anyway, welcome, everyone, whether you're Jimmy Legg or not. I hope you're all doing very, very well. And I'm looking forward to... This is quite a self-indulgent session, this kind of world whiskey thing, okay? Most vPubs are. We all know this, right? There's things that I want to talk about. You guys give me the ability to talk about the things that interest me, and hopefully I can hit upon some things that interest you guys too. But I've been kind of collecting this wee cookie trail of gifts, let's say, and I've had to pair them out. Actually, there's some gifts here, like the one over my shoulder here from my pal Bill. That's not going to feature tonight, and there's so many others on the shelf there. So if you're sitting there kind of wondering if the gift that you gave to me is going to be one that comes up tonight, I apologize. I can only do a few, and I kind of have to make sure that there's a nice spread, and I have to pick ones that fit together quite well and are interesting for different reasons, let's say. So I've got half of them that are gifts from you, and then half of them that are very much me indulging myself, things that I am interested in based on commentary and feedback from you guys in the community, but also things that I'm genuinely curious to try myself. So we know immediately then that I'm going to be going through, it was originally 5 and it's been advertised as 5, but there's one that's very, very special. I'm going to keep it to the end. And if we're in good time and I'm in good spirits, I'm going to open it because it's a very, very special thing. And it's quite a compelling thing for me anyway, and I would like to just open it and give it a try. So we'll see how we get on. I think it might end up being 6 whiskies tonight. I've got 6 Glencairns in front of me tonight. I'm going to indulge myself with an extra dram because the schools are on holiday tomorrow and I don't need to worry about being up too early to pick up the kids. So it means I can have a wee extra pour. All of them have been picked to not be similar, but at the same time, kind of, you know, show what's happening out there, potentially happening out there in world whiskey, whether it's the New World, North America, South America, whether it's down in the Southern Hemisphere in New Zealand and Tasmania, whether it's in the very, very far east in Japan, or a wee bit closer to home in the British Isles. I'm talking about Ireland here. Those are the areas I'm going to focus on. That's what I've whittled it down to. And I do believe that we're going to have 6 really interesting whiskies tonight. It's not a review. They're uncorkings. I'll be giving you my first impression and just talking about the whiskey. Why is that important? Why is that valuable to the community? Well, it doesn't matter if you're in here live or if you're picking it up on the replay. Watch the reaction in the chat. Watch the knowledgeable whiskey folk chime in and share their opinion on the things that I'm uncorking, their experience of it. It's kind of funny when I go back and I mark the chapter markers, the timestamps for these vPubs. The live chat is running as I mark that, and you guys are really good at adding in very, very useful and succinct little pieces of information that helps everyone that tunes in. It means that it's not just me and my opinion and my monologues, right? Anyway, before I get into all of that, let's just mention I'm very, very excited about 2 things. I'm excited about Saturday coming. Surely you're aware that Saturday this week, 23rd of September, 6 o'clock UK time, it's the Online Scotch Whisky Awards nomination show. Ralphie's coming over here. Hopefully the 2 of us will be sitting together in the same room, and we'll be bringing to you 6 nominations for each of the 9 categories for 2023 and telling you immediately how to get involved, how you can get involved in deciding what's going to be the winners for 2023's OSWAs, and also what's going to be the People's Choice too. That's coming up on Saturday. Still lots of work to do, lots of prep and everything, but the nominations are in, they're locked in, and they're decided. Can't wait to share them with you on Saturday. The other thing to look forward to, of course, is just a week on Saturday on the 30th. We're calling it Legfest. It's going to be really quite an interesting gathering in Glasgow at the Bon Accord. No idea how many people are going to be there, but I was just going through some rough numbers in my head, and we're easily into quite a few dozen. And that's just the ones that I know about. And it seems to me like almost half of you are coming in from quite far afield, coming in from all corners of the planet to descend on the Bon Accord. At 5 o'clock that night, we'll meet for dinner at Akbar's, which is an Indian restaurant right around the corner. So if you want to eat before you go around and join us for some drams at the Bon Accord, meet us there at 5 o'clock at night. From there on in, about 6:30, I would suggest, 7 o'clock, we'll make our way to the Bon Accord, and we'll be looked after there by the staff at the Bon Accord. Very informal gathering, just a kind of meet and greet for everyone. I'll be bringing a few drams along, of course, drams donated from me and drams donated from the community. And then after those are finished, we can tear into whatever craft beers and fantastic whiskies that they've got on offer at the Bon Accord. You're not short a choice, believe me. Can't wait. Super excited for it. I hope that you guys are too. Sorry to everyone that's not going to be able to make it this time, but know that if we make a wee success of this thing on a week on Saturday, we'll be doing it again. Okay, good stuff. Before I go into all of that, before I take you on a wee trip around the world, bottle by bottle, I've got a wee glass on ready to welcome you all. I'll jump into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Remember, if you're trying to get my attention, just type Aquavitae, like so many of you are, and it lights up orange. Fantastic. So good to see you all. Zach Andrews is already in and bought me a dram. Good to see you, Zach. How are you doing? Cheers, my friend. Hope my balconis gets highlighted. Buddy, I don't have... Your balconis is nearly rinsed. It's almost gone. I have featured both the Mirador and the single malt, the Texas number one single malt on previous vPubs. I'm not going to be anywhere in the United States tonight, but I am in the Americas. 2 picks from the Americas, actually. Zach, thank you very much for your drama, friend. I hope you're doing well. Cheers. Julian Rickman is saying, evening, Roy. Evening, Barflies. Looking forward to another vPub adventure. And Gary Carew is saying, cheers all. Aquavite, Gary and Julian, good to welcome you both. Mike Molasses is saying, good evening, Aquavite. Scotch is world whiskey for me. Of course, Mike, and that's what I've got to remember. When I talk about world whiskey, I'm speaking about non-Scotch. I don't know if that's any less clumsy way to say it, but I hope that nobody's offended by how I term it. Falsgraf, good to see you. Class is saying, hey, are you usually talking about interesting stuff? And usually very interestingly. Well, Class, you can come back again, my friend. Thank you so much for being kind. I appreciate it, buddy. Good to see you. Jerry Miller is saying, good evening, Roy. Good evening, Jerry. Jerry, quick heads up. Aquavite bottles are obviously out. I noticed that you probably didn't get the notification today, Jerry, because you don't have a tier against your name in Patreon. But you are at the disciple level, so you should probably have received it. It's no great shakes. You will get it tomorrow, buddy. Don't worry about it. But I just picked that up earlier. Good to see you, Jerry. Good to see you. Private DMs on a live vPub, Roy. What you doing? Gregor Dykeman is here. Gregor, you're in Scotland as well, aren't you, buddy? Enjoying yourself, I hope. Hi from Port Charlotte, Isla, off to Glasgow tomorrow. Gregor, I hope you're having a fantastic time. I noticed that you bumped into our Pete Head, who's not going to be able to join us tonight because he's off the radar somewhere in Isla or something. But I caught that picture of you and Pete Head bumping into each other on the ferry, and it just filled my heart with joy. It's just fantastic to see it. Gregor, I hope Scotland's been nice to you. You seem to be enjoying yourself from the photos that you've shared already. Cheers, buddy. And Reb Mordecai is saying, would you really refer to Irish whiskey as world whiskey? No, Reb, you've got a point. I would refer to it as Irish whiskey, but I would refer to it as non-Scotch. So it's yet another claim for maybe me referring it to anything other than Scotch. Douglas Young is saying, evening, Roy, evening, Barflies. Good to see you, Douglas, and nice to welcome you too, Reb. Just as it jumps, apologies. Whiskey Shared, Toby, good to see you, buddy. I hope you're keeping well. He's saying, evening, Roy. And Alistair Grace saying, those two bottles behind you look familiar. Absolutely. They're just here. There's not going to be any kind of photo. The Patreons are sick of this. They're getting updates every day from me and things like that. They're just sitting there just to look nice and be handsome. So I might touch up on it. There might be an opportunity to kind of talk a wee bit about why I've picked these. What's kind of, to a lot of people looking on, might think that it's quite a risky thing to do. And I was very aware of that when I picked them. I knew exactly what I was doing, picking refill casks, right, instead of first fill, picking hoggies, bigger barrels rather than smaller, which means that there's more. Hopefully that's a good thing. But also kind of the liquid to wood contact in a bigger cask. And also, especially when I'm picking Ardnamurchan, I've specifically picked unpeated, that really quite visceral, raw West Coast Ardnamurchan mineralic style. I wanted full access to the spirit. That's exactly what I wanted out of the bottle picks. The reason there are two is that they are both supposed to be identical casks, but they are so remarkably different. They're different from 100 Paces because one's gold and the other one's russet red. But when you get the Ardnamurchan DNA is still intact, absolutely. The mineralic side is still there. The things that you come to know from Ardnamurchan, the boldness, the personality, it's all there. But then you've got this remarkably different. The only thing that kind of made it that difference is, yes, the cask, but the previous incumbent. What I'm talking about here is refill. And in the case of these two Ardnamurchans, it's ex-Adelphi hogsheads. I'm talking about ex-Scotch whisky casks. Anyway, I noticed that you got yours, Alistair. I'm very glad. And over the course of the next couple of days, once you've let them settle, get over the bottle shock and everything, I hope you dive in and get to know them. Whiskey and Wine Trails, Tom is in. Good to see you, buddy. Whatever you do, Roy, don't mention the Diageo special releases, but feel free to talk about the bottles in the background. I will stay away from the Diageo special releases. It doesn't... I've said enough, I think, on social media and everywhere. And tonight's not about that at all. Sandro Fazzolari is saying, Roy, this type of vPub is a learning experience for me, and likely the enthusiast will add insight. Looking forward to Saturday with dear Ralphie. Legfest will be great. Thanks. Ciao. You're going to make it, Sandro? Are you making it to Legfest? That would be amazing. Arnie Tiger is saying, great topic as usual. Thank you, Arnie. And Excess to Scotch, good to see you. I think it's... Did I work out that your name is Claudius? Hey, Roy, greetings from the Netherlands, Slantia. I think it's Claudius. Nice to welcome you in Access to Scotch. Danny Keenan saying, good evening, Barflies and Aquavite. Good to see you, Danny. Who did I miss? Rick Johnson celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 12 months, and Graham Young has bought me a dram. Roy, only a week now, so much looking forward to getting some faces to names with these. Dear Barflies, thanks for all you do for this community, Roy. Stick around if you can, Graham. Maybe you're having a busy day. I can't believe you're coming all the way over from Canada for Legfest, but I'm going to be really grateful to see you again, buddy. But one of your bottles will eventually see the light of day tonight. Whiskey Games is saying even Roy can't make Legfest, but we'll be there in spirit. That is a shame, Matthew. Maybe next time, maybe see you at the Glasgow Whisky Festival. Time for a dram. Gregor is here. Is Glasgow truly ready for all that's about to endure? I think it'll be nice and gentle. Am I being naive, Gregor? Good to see you, buddy. Kevin Grant on Whiskey, cousin Kevin's in, saying slightly late to the vPub, but sipping on a Dalmonic. 5-year-old at the moment, watching you in the big telly tonight. Thanks, Kevin. I hope you're enjoying that wee Dalmonic, and it's good to see you, and buddy, I hope you're keeping well. Gene Kelly. Now, there's a familiar name, right? Not from the vPub. I think it's the first time I've welcomed you in here, just as the chat jumps every time. Gene Kelly saying, Aquavite, looking forward to the OSWAs. I'm fairly new to Aquavite, and I'm loving it. Gene, I'm glad that I caught you then. That's the first time I've been able to welcome you into the vPub, and it's brilliant to have you here. Listen, sincere thanks to everybody that's joined Patreon recently. Everything tends to kick off after you come back from the summer break. I'm always a wee bit nervous that it doesn't, but it's picked up again. It's super busy. There's lots of communications, lots of direct messages. There's lots and lots of things happening and going on. But for tonight, suffice to say, thank you so much for your support. Let's just use this to slow down, have that sacrosanct little pocket of whiskey time, and just consider all the things that we love about this great spirit. Mostly getting together and enjoying it, right? Sugar Kitty's here looking after us tonight. You might want to look at chat. Petehead is here. Frank, superb, amazing. Petehead is actually in. He's managed to find some internet. Frank, I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're not too tired, and I hope you can stay a while. He's saying, I'm here, but I'm in limited typing mode. On Isla, indeed, enjoying Scotland trip with my dad. A wee trip, great privilege. So you're on your tablet. I know what that's like on mobile, buddy. Just kick back with a dram. I hope you've got one in your hand, you and your dad, and relax for a wee bit. Keith McDonald is here, saying, I've been only catching the replay. Happy to jump in and say hi, Roy and Barflies. Just got my Ardna Vitae releases. Oh, wow. You just picked them up, did you, Keith? Now, you're in the northeast of the States, I think, Keith, so it might take a wee while to get to you, but thank you for your support, buddy. I hope you enjoy them when they arrive. And Gerben is saying, I hope to make it next year. I hope you make it too, Gerben. Cheers, everyone. Hopefully nobody I've missed. Jimmy Jazz has given away 20 Aquavite memberships, and Danny Keenan is celebrating being a member of the Aquavite Barflies for 7 months. All of those guys, Jimmy Jazz, Justin Wand, celebrating for 5 months, Danny Keenan, Rick Johnson, who I mentioned earlier, saying good afternoon from San Francisco. Good to see you, Rick. All of these guys keep the vPub completely ad-free. When I talk as much as I do, the last thing you need is ads on top. So all of these guys means I don't monetize with YouTube, and it keeps the vPub completely without adverts. Cheers to you all. Welcome. Right, let's get on with this topic. What I've got in my glass right now is Scotch. I'm starting with Scotch. Why? Well, because I wanted to pick a Scotch that was right in the middle of the spectrum, right? The hardest thing to do is to pick one whiskey. You just can't do it. You just can't pick one whiskey. It's so difficult. But I decided to just do it. I'm going to pick a whiskey off the shelf and say, this is a good whiskey. This is a whiskey I would recommend, and it's a whiskey I would replace and keep on the shelf myself. Maybe even one I would consider a perma-shelf whiskey. But more than that, what I want to do is pick a whiskey that represents what Scotch is, what it's all about. For me, of course, everything that you hear in the vPub is my opinion. And for me, Scotch is something that's been matured with time, something that leverages the climate, something that leverages the definitions of Scotch, something that harnesses the tradition of it. And something that's usually, I mean, I'm enjoying lots and lots of young whiskies right now. I'm loving young whiskey. I've never experienced so much flavor in young whiskey as we can do today. You know, some of the new distilleries that's coming out, it's fantastic, and it's going to be great to see these things evolve. But if you were to pick a classic style of Scotch and a classic age, you would be in the teenage years, right? And you would probably have something that's kind of gonna have a decent amount of sherry, a decent amount of bourbon, a decent amount of refill cask, as well as a maybe a little bit of first fill in there as well. And you're gonna have something that's flavorful. And if it's since it's the vPub and it's me, you're gonna wanna have something that's pretty natural too. And this is what I've picked. So this is my kind of anchor for the rest of tonight. If I'm going to make any comparisons, we're going to be comparing it with something along the lines of this lovely bottle of Craigellachie. This is their 13-year-old core range product. It's in the 50s now. It's north of £50. But it's a 13-year-old at 46% ABV. We believe it to be natural colour. It's not too dark. It's quite pale. I'm down to the dregs of this one, as you can see. I do enjoy this stuff. 46% ABV, as I say, and it does say no chill filtering on the back label. Yeah, this is a masterclass from Dewar's. Dewar's have got some really quite interesting products out there. The Altmore that's annoyingly just been discontinued. They've done great things recently, bringing up the presentation of Royal Bracla. This Craigellachie and its older but much more expensive siblings have been fantastic whiskies. This 13-year-old is an absolute favourite, and I think it's a very, very good example of good Scotch. And if you were to place it somewhere in the map of Scotch, it would probably sit. I'm not speaking about geographically speaking. I'm speaking about age and presentation and flavour profile and everything. I think it would kind of sit somewhere close to the centre. So this is our stake in the ground. This is what we're going to kind of use as our calibrator for the night as we go through and contemplate these world whiskies. One of the things that we'll be considering is potentially the threats to Scotch whisky that these world whiskies have. But I'm not so interested in that. I'm much more interested in what potential these whiskies give us as lovers of the spirit, lovers of whiskey, lovers of flavour. Because let's be honest, if any category of Scotch, any category of whiskey, be it Scotch or Irish or American or Tasmanian or Japanese or wherever it's from, if they continue to have just the prices climbing or already highly inflated prices, we're going to be drawn to where we're finding value. And by that, I don't mean cheap. I mean value. I mean a category that's giving us good, delicious whiskey, lovely flavors at a decent price. Believe it or not, in 2023, Scotch is still providing that. Yes, somebody already mentioned the ludicrous news and prices that come out from Diageo this week for the special releases. Really, really hurting. A 10-year-old Clynelish at £175, a 12-year-old Roselle, from one of these massive MGP Middleton styled distilleries up in Speyside called Roselle, right? The first single malt from there, 12 years old, £120. It's heartbreaking. There are no special releases under £100. Everything is triple figures. That hurts a lot, but that's not representative of Scotch whisky. They are not. Once upon a time they were, but they're old hat now. They really are. There's lots of incumbent producers. The one I've just held up in front of you right now is a perfect example. Think of the Deanstons and Ledgicks and Bunnahavens of this world, the Tobermories. Think of the fantastic experiences we are having out of Glencadam. Think of the fantastic experiences we're enjoying out of all the new producers that's coming onto the scene. And sometimes it's shocking to look at the founding years of these new producers and realize just how mature they are. We've seen a 10-year-old release from Wolfburn this very year. There are areas of the Scotch industry that's behaving like the product is scarce, and it's not. That's behaving like maybe it's an attitude of making hay while the sun shines, get as much money out of it for a short-termist attitude. But I would remind them all that they are just temporary guardians of a very, very, very long-standing industry, and they need to keep it in good health for the future. And by squeezing every penny out of it just now and behaving like it's the only track in the jukebox is not a good strategy, in my opinion. I'm going to hopefully hold up some examples tonight that are arguably threats to Scotch's future. Let's get on with it. Donald Rance is saying Irish whiskey suffers from horrible pricing in most countries. Honestly, the pricing of most of it is beyond reason now. There's no reason why Middleton is charging what they are in most places. You're not wrong, Donald. You're not wrong. But Middleton have actually still got some fantastic, good value products out there just about today. A lot of it is overpriced. A lot of it is placed in a situation where there is a very willing audience paying that. I don't know for how much longer. Cheers, Donald. I'm going to go by ABV tonight. It's the best way I thought I could pick it out. It kind of bucks the one I've added on at the end. Bucks that ABV line it a little bit, but we'll get to that. So we'll start with the lighter stuff, the more gentle stuff, and we'll work our way up. So I haven't picked by what I'm most excited about or anything like that, just going by ABV. Let's get our first bottle opened. It's not going to be this, because this is well opened. This is practically rinsed. This is a bottle. I think I've written Glenduncan on this, so I imagine it must be a gift from Glenduncan. I really hope it is. But this is a bottle of Lark. And this is their Tokai finished. Look at the spelling of Tokai there, okay? But we're down in Tasmania here. This is a cask strength release at 54%. I think it's cask strength from Lark. Tokai wine finished Tasmanian whiskey. Not available anywhere in the UK. This was brought to me and put in my hand. Glenn, I hope it's from you. If I'm making a mistake there, I apologise to whoever it was. I've had a couple of these over the years. Always in these really, really thin bottles, and honestly, if you've got a wobbly table or a wobbly shelf, don't put this on it. They fall over easier than an electric toothbrush. It's not the most stable thing to hold precious liquid. However, you can see why they do it, because they've got a lot of kind of shelf presence there. They've got that big label to get the branding across and things. Branding that you can't actually read from a distance at all. And then all that people do is on the shelf, they just turn it sideways like that, and it's rendered redundant. Anyway, this is the Tokai release, and I've enjoyed my time with that. I haven't had a lot of this. This was brought along to an event in Glasgow last year, and it was shared out with everybody, so everybody got to try it. So I haven't had too much out of it, but what I have had, I've enjoyed. But then Peter Eichen and I met up in Glasgow recently, and he brought a gift this is actually a gift for me and Ben Whiskey Geek Clarkson. So he brought it for us in the hope that we could share it. Obviously, Ben and I live quite a long distance from each other. He's having a bit of a hiatus right now because he's got a young family and he's focusing on all of that stuff. But I'm still in touch with Ben, and I'll open this tonight and make sure that I take a wee chunk out of it and give him most of the majority of whatever's left in the bottle, Peter. But I'm going to start with this tonight, because what we have in Lark, with Bill Lark, founding Tasmanian whiskey. Go back to 1992, okay? There's no distilling in Tasmania, no whiskey distilling in Tasmania whatsoever. And Bill Lark comes along in 1992, 31 years ago now, and he founds a distillery down in Tasmania. Now, Bill Lark is still around. He's still working as a brand ambassador for the company. And it's been invested in and bought over and things a lot of times in those 30 years, but Bill is still very much around, and he's very much seen as the kind of father of Tasmanian distilling. What does that mean? I can tell you that it means that there are close to 40 distilleries on the island of Tasmania today, and that's just the ones I could find looking. I know that there's going to be a lot more out there that I couldn't find, smaller distilleries or ones that are in very early days of production or ones that are perhaps work in progress. This is the similar explosion that we are seeing in new distilleries in Scotland, new distilleries in Ireland, new distilleries in England. And scale that up to the new distilleries. And I'm not going to speak about mixed mash bill tonight. I'm not going to even speak about corn. Everything I'm sharing with you tonight is barley based. 5 out of 6 of the bottles is malt, single malt barley. The other one that isn't single malt barley is still barley. Even if I just focus on malt whiskey, and in North America, malt whiskey distilleries of scale is already broken 100, And if you look at much smaller distilleries in North America, I'm speaking about the United States, there's talk of it being over 1,000 distillers. This is making malt. That's what Scotland makes. I know that Scotland makes grain whiskey and we make malt whiskey, and grain is still 90% of it, and by volume, malt whiskey is 10%, but probably closer to 30-40% by value. But is the thing that we celebrate in our community, the thing that has drawn us here, tends to be malt whiskey. Anyway, Lark whiskey is 31 years old. No glug. I bet you if I'd poured that the other way, I'd have got a nice glug out the bottle, right? Yeah. I'm still a noob in some respects, right? Anyway, the one I've poured from Lark tonight, the gift from Peter Eichen, quite a tight cork there, Peter, is Lark's Classic Cask. This is 43% ABV, and this flask, regardless of it looking like a big bottle, it's only a 50 cl. This is a slightly smaller bottle. Now, I'm not suggesting that this spirit in here is from the 90s. This is a non-age statement. This is going to be still quite young whiskey. It's only in recent years that Lark has actually got up to any great grand scale, to the point that we can start to see some things occasionally in Europe. But if you were to look around for Lark whiskey right now, you're not going to find very much. And what you will find is going to be quite expensive. So, of course, I'm going to have to kind of caveat everything I stick my nose in and sip tonight. And I'm only going to have 1 or 2 sips out of everything. But it's always going to be neck pour, first impression. No bottle shock here, because the bottles have been on the shelf for a long time. The whiskey's settled. That's really important. But once you open the whiskey, usually, in my experience, it's up to you whether you believe that neck pour is a thing or not. But I always find time in a glass, with a bit of headspace, a bit of air in the headspace of the bottle, makes a big difference and just helps the whiskey relax and round out a little bit. Still, really quite round and full and rich for 43% whiskey. This is not thin, nothing suggesting here that it's watery in any way. But it's oaky. There's quite a bit of oak here. Quite a bit of ripe stone fruit with that oak. It's very soft, not a lot of spice. But the thing, as soon as I put my nose in at the start, and I reacted potentially with it, the thing I noticed straight away, and I bet you I'll dial this out in time because I've started to dial out in American whiskies, is that sometimes I pick up a very slightly, and it's going to sound negative, but it's not, because it's quite a sweet, enjoyable thing, but it's also a little bit acetone-y. So you get this kind of, and I'm not really sure what acetone is, but I know that when I smell that in whiskey, that note is described as acetone. I've never been around kind of photography processing or anything, but it's almost a very soft solvent. Anyway, Lark Classic Cask. Cheers. This is reminiscent of, this is quite aromatic. So immediately I'm starting to feel quite a lot of wood spices here. It's got the kind of cedar wood and things coming in. It's behaving a wee bit like almost like an STR cask would. Some oaky notes coming in. Not bad, not acrid, not bad in any way. These are good, positive things. So it's cooking spices, wood spices. Think cedar wood. Think a cigar box, that kind of thing. Ripe fruit, rich fruit, not bright clean, not white stone fruit, not orchard fruit, but kind of ripe stone fruit. Ripe, mellow, soft citrus. This is a very elegant thing. It's a very clean, very easy thing. The ABV is probably helping this arrive quite softly too. The only spice I'm getting from it is kind of a wood spice thing rather than an alcohol spice. but it's quite heady and aromatic despite being at 43%. I think that it's the type of thing that you would put. This is double distilled. It's double distillation. It's pot still distillation. But I think you could put this down in front of people, and I think that even somebody that's relatively new into whiskey and who's quite comfortable poking their way around the Scotch realm, let's say, would know that this is something a wee bit different. This is a slightly different cadence to Scotch, slightly different vibe and feel to it. It's a little bit aromatic. It's a little bit woody. I would maybe even suggest that I think that there's going to be some wine cask involvement in here. I never even paid attention to that. Oh, that's too, that writing's far too wee. So, okay. It says it right in the label. 100% aged in first fill sherry and port casks. Okay, port. Read the label, Roy. My goodness. Port, okay. For me, port often brings a kind of dryness to the finish, a wee bit of red berry notes and things, and it's here, but it's too soft for me to have noticed it in the first pass, right? This is just good, easy, classy whiskey. I don't know what you would have to pay for this. Certainly up here in Europe, you would have to pay through the nose for it, I imagine, but it's $200 a bottle in Australia, which is about just over £100. Bear in mind that this is a 50 cl bottle. So immediately what's exposed here is one of the advantages that Scotch still has, and that is volume, history, and the biggest thing is scale. The volume and scale of production over that history, that recent history. And I know that there's been stock shortages and problems, and we've seen things going on age statement, and we've seen prices bump up and everything, and we've seen older stock disappear quite quickly, but that's always happened in whiskey. What we're seeing for the last 15 years is such huge increases to that scale to build on something that was already at scale and very, very mature as an industry. But what we're seeing in these places like Tasmania is that everything is very, very small, and even a long established distillery like Lark is still, compared to what's available from some of the big Scotch producers, they're still tiny. So the prices are reflective of supply and demand. You could argue the prices here in the UK are perhaps not. It's to do with the distance and the fact that there probably isn't any kind of volume distribution yet. But look at the prices domestically, 200 Australian dollars domestically, somewhere in the order of 100, 110, 120 pounds. I'm not up in my exchange rates, but I think it's something along those lines. So would we be paying £100 for a 50 cl Scotch at 43%? Probably not. Probably not. So what we've got here is good whiskey, and I can see why this is being loved. I can see why people are raving about this. This is genuinely good whiskey with pedigree under its belt now. More than 30 years of production now. Actually, lovely whiskey. I predict that if I spent time with this, despite this being at 43%, I think that this is going to start to bring more and more complexity. It's going to bring more and more detail and more of an interesting offering to me. Peter Eichen, thanks very much for bringing this and putting it in my hands. I was very, very grateful to spend some time with you. I have loved the chocolate you brought me was cherry ripe, delicious, very reminded me of a kind of it's cherry obviously, but it reminded me of the raspberry ruffle bar that we used to have. It was kind of a coconut fondant inside in the ruffle bar. This was a cherry fondant thing in chocolate, but the one I loved was called a violet crumble or violet crunch or something. It's Australian chocolate, but it reminded me of a king size crunchy. I love those two. Peter, cheers to you. Thank you. Okay, so that's us. I encourage you to have a wee look at what's happening in Tasmania. Lark is perhaps the longest, most established, I believe, but we've also got Hellier's Road and Sullivan's Cove and all of these other distilleries that you probably recognize the names of, but you've probably not been able to touch the liquid. But I kind of feel like this is a growing thing. If they're at 40 distilleries, they are coming. They are coming. And as there's more and more on offer, it's going to make its way around the globe. Brian Cabayas is in. He's bought me a wee dram to say, I love Tasmania and other Aussie whiskies. The only problem is the price. Alcohol excise and VAT makes it more steep. Australian government is the third highest taxing authority in the world. I hear you. I absolutely hear you. We've seen a tax hike in the UK recently as well, Brian. It's hurting us, and especially when you see it in like a £30 bottle is suddenly a £34 bottle. There's lots of kind of discussions that you can get into that to justify that alcohol should be taxed and heavily taxed and things. But I would also counter that alcohol has always been heavily taxed. So, it's not for tonight's vPub, but I hear you that the pricing in Tasmania has probably got a heck of a lot to do with that. Probably a huge chunk of that $200 I'm speaking about for this whiskey is exactly that. I wonder if it's priced on ABV, which would maybe make them more interested to take it down to 43%. Don't know if it's chill filtered or not. Just because it's 43% doesn't mean that it automatically is, but I would suggest it probably is. George Ellis saying acetone is in the head's cut. Yeah, it's funny. Brian Cabayas is saying violet crumble. Perfect. That was the chocolate. Superb stuff. It's basically like cinder toffee inside, like honeycomb candy. It was fantastic. Jimmy Leggett saying, I'm coming to Glasgow on Saturday to see Peter Lee, leaving for Campbelltown on Sunday. Any chance of shaking your hand on Saturday? We'd be tight, Jimmy, because and Jimmy, you're in Glasgow. That's incredible. I'd normally be, anything to get in there and see. Nothing would stop me meeting up with you, Jimmy, apart from the OSWAs Nominations show, which is happening at 6 o'clock on Saturday. Let's keep in touch, buddy, and let's see if we can get a chance to meet up. But you're also going to be there on Sunday morning too, potentially, right? Prestige, like was just saying, Aussie distillers are now being charged $1.03 per litre of alcohol, per pure litre of alcohol. I don't know what that means in the relative scale of things, but I guess what you're saying there, Andrew, is that you're talking about just how heavily that they're taxed. Let's keep the pace going. Fantastic start, delicious whiskey. Going to enjoy getting through the top of this bottle before I pass it over to Ben and see what he thinks about it too. But I predict the complexity and the quality of this whiskey will help with a wee bit of air and time. It's already off to a great start. I would love to have Sullivan's Cove on the shelf. I would love to have more examples of these world whiskies. But as I've already pointed out and what's been pointed out, if it's difficult to afford domestically in Tasmania, you can imagine what it's like here. Yes, Sunday morning too, says Jimmy. Fantastic. And Jimmy's saying silly OSWAs. Absolutely the silly OSWAs. Great stuff. So where are we going to go now? Well, if we're going by ABV, we need to go east now. And I want to show you something first, because you're sick of me talking about this, so I'm not going to talk about it tonight. But I'll give you an executive summary of what I think of this bottle, because I love it. I genuinely love this bottle of whiskey. This is Nikka's Yoichi. Now, it's 45% ABV, which is strange. It's one of the most opaque bottlings, and they don't really tell you what's going on here. They just kind of want to tell you how fantastic it is and stuff. Anyway, £75 for this, ever so slightly lightly peated. I decided to take a gamble on this. I don't know when it was now, whether it was 2022 or 2021, but it was a while ago. And I enjoyed it from the first sip, but I came to love it. I came to really, really love this Yoichi, non-age statement Japanese whiskey. Single malt, obviously made at the Yoichi distillery. I then was so confident in it that I took it along to the Glasgow Blind Challenge in November last year and put it in the lineup. It was obviously the world whiskey entry. And at one point during the tasting, Roddy came up to me and said, please tell me that the yellow dot is not... please tell me that the yellow dot is a Scotch whiskey, he said. He was loving it so much. He wanted it to be an affordable Scotch. And I said, unfortunately, no. I'll let you know what it is in a wee minute. And of course, everybody got to find out that the yellow dot was actually Japanese whiskey and that it won the tasting. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody there picked it as their favourite, of course. We had 5 whiskies, really interesting whiskies. It wasn't everyone's favourite. But if you measure the consensus of the room, by individual and by team, the Yoichi comes out on top. So it's quite fascinating. £75, £76. It's not cheap whiskey. But then I have to consider what I would have to spend to get the equivalent balance, wonderfully subtle flavor spectrum, wonderfully. It's difficult. It's difficult to talk and articulate what this whiskey tastes like. At first approach, it's very, very subtle. It's almost like it's hiding from you a wee bit. And then sip by sip, all these delicate little notes appear, all these little pinpoints of detail. And you realize that the subtlety and elegance in that balance is really quite difficult to find. Now, I'm not suggesting that every whiskey should be like that. In fact, I would argue against that. I love the fact that some are really bold and brash and rough around the edges and all knees and elbows. And I love all styles of whiskey. But if I wanted this in Scotch, I really don't know where I would go. You guys seem to agree with me at the tasting last year. Everybody enjoyed it, and I know that some of you have picked it up on the back of that experience since. So it's inevitable then that where I'm going to go from there is to its sibling. And I should have done it a long time ago because you guys have been talking about this for long enough now. 45% ABV from the Miyagikyo distillery, another Japanese distillery. Now, this is an interesting story behind this too. Michael McDonald has bought me a wee dram. Thank you very much, Michael. No comment or anything. You've just sent the wee dram across. Thank you so much. Thank you for being an easy seal to open. And a screw top, of course, so no pop. And we'll get this Miyagikyo in the glass after months of you guys telling me I should. So this is not a gift from the community. This is, I have bought this myself. And of course you want to know how much it is. The exact same price as the non-age statement. Yoichi, it's expensive. Non-age stated. Japanese whiskey, 45% ABV, pretty opaque presentation, typically Japanese, typical Nikka in its presentation, 75, £76. You're asking a lot, but that's why you're here in the vPub. That's why I'm doing it for you, because if this is kind of weak whiskey, I'll tell you that it's quite weak whiskey. If I don't think it's worth 75 or £76, I'll tell you, maybe not tonight, but over time, right? This is first impressions tonight. First impressions are valuable. First impressions can be good and useful. And good whiskies are good whiskies from the first pour onwards, but some of them are a wee bit shy and take a while to open up. So I'm just rolling this Glencairn around on the desk here just to coat the side of the glass in the whiskey. I don't want any notes from the glass. I don't want dishwasher notes or tea towel notes or whatever it may be. I just want whiskey. Very shy. Very soft, very delicate, very quiet. Unexpected so. Bright though, so getting quite a nice clean cereal, floral cereal, and lovely fruit. White fruit. I think, I don't. Unripe peach, wee bit of apricot, that kind of thing. And some kind of sweetness in the background. Maybe go with fruit, maybe a kind of syrup or an oil, like orange oil or something. But it's quite closed. It's quite quiet. I think it's one to raise a wee glass to Michael and say thanks for the dram. And it's one to sit, just leave it sitting for a wee while. Cheers. Oh. Just sipped that quite young Tasmanian whiskey, quite cask forward, quite woody, wood spice. This is not that. This is just excellent whiskey. Sorry. I know you don't want to hear it. It's non-stated Japanese whiskey, opaque presentation. It's 70 odd pounds. First sip, bang. There's when a good whiskey comes along, it it can maybe be shy and quiet on the nose and things, but as soon as you get it on the palate, it lights everything up. I'm going in again. Oh yeah, beauty. Japanese whiskies often act like a blend. You know how, malts are kind of like this. They're kind of quite communicative and jaggy and are quite expressive in certain ways. It's like you have to layer lots of them together to get it to smooth out, to get the waveform to kind of smooth out, and it's something that's a bit more kind of a bit more married and complete and integrated. Whereas when he's a Japanese, even this being a single malt, this is already behaving a wee bit like a blend. It is so, and I don't mean linear, I don't mean straightforward, I don't mean simple, because there's detail here. What I'm speaking about is that the frequency, if you like, is just much, much more detailed. It's much finer. This is elegant. This is VIP whiskey. This is the type of whiskey that you can pour for anybody who likes whiskey is going to enjoy this, because it is just so approachable, so good. And I don't mean soft and smooth, because there is detail here. That's a belter. That's just a very good whiskey. No bones about it. Is it as good as the Yoichi? Yes. It's not the same as the Yoichi. It's a different take on the Yoichi. The Yoichi's maybe a wee bit more bold, and I would say that there's maybe even a wee bit more elegance here on the Miyagikyo. Of course, the Yoichi, you have to search for the smoke in it, especially if you're me. But it's smoke, whereas this is unpeated. And the finish is, I'm still tasting this whiskey. 45%, I'm still tasting it. A light, elegant, delicate whiskey, and it's still there. Incredible. Falscraft is saying, behaving like a blend, historically, isn't that what they originally learned Scotch to be about? They surely refined the art of making something like that. Well, absolutely. But you can talk about something, when you taste it, suddenly it makes sense. That's exactly what they're doing here. This is a very well crafted, very well put together whiskey. It remains a single malt. It's all from one location, but it is absolutely classy. You're absolutely spot on. It's a blend of potentially hundreds and hundreds of casks. I don't know how big an outturn these things are. It's huge scale. Domestically in Japan, you're picking this up for 25 and 30 pounds. Annoyingly, when it gets here in the UK, it's expensive. It's 75 pounds. Let's do the Yoichi thing then. In order to get elegance and balance like this in Scotch, how much would I need to pay? Well, that's too hard. That's too difficult. It's too nebulous a question. Let's go with, if I tasted this whiskey, would I think it could be Scotch? Yes. And if I thought this could be Scotch and was told that it was £100, it's easier for me to talk about it if I say £75 what it actually cost. I would say yes. Now, you saw me rolling it around there, 45% as well. You saw me rolling it around, or you heard that I was rolling it around. And it's not going to focus this camera. I've been having trouble with it. But as you can see, it's really, really quite oily and clinging to the glass. And I think it's that oiliness that's keeping it on my palate for that long finish too. So, so, so glad to have this. So glad to have it on the shelf. Yes, it's worth. Sorry, it's the same as the Yoichi. You don't want to hear this because it's expensive whiskey, I know, but it's worth the money. That's worth £75, and that's just my first impressions. If it changes, if it flounders on me, I'll let you know. I'll come back and let you know. But first pass, that's incredible. Douglas Young is saying that's a belter is my sort of review. I'll be honest, I'm just being, there's no, it's the vPub. You pay for me. I buy my own whiskey. It's all my own opinions. It's always going to be like that. It's the only way I know how to behave. Whiskey and Wine Trail's the same. At some point, you have to abandon the brand age statements, the opinions of the pundits, and even your own preconceptions and judge your liquids on its merits. That's what Yoichi taught me. Tom, you're spot on. Listen, our experience tells us that natural whiskey is better. Not every time, all the time, on every comparison head to head. But over the course of your cookie trail of whiskies that starts to weigh down your shelves and cabinets and spill onto the floor and everything that we all do, right? Over time, you start to mind map that the natural whiskey is where the engagement lies. It's fact. It's just fact. Don't take anything out and don't add anything. But something as well put together as this comes along and can upend that thinking. And whiskey, if you allow whiskey to keep you in check, it can keep you in check, because we all suffer from thinking that we've worked it out. We all suffer from snobbery. We all suffer from prejudices and biases, you quite rightly say, Tom. Andrew Butler is saying, did you have a chance to try the Japanese samples yet? Andrew, I haven't. And I guarantee that you'd be so frustrated to hear me say that. It's one of those things that, especially with the samples that you sent me, I would need an entire night just to sit down and give them the reverence they deserve, right? I still have them, buddy. I still have them in the box with all the fantastic labeling. I will get to it someday. Andrew, when I do get to it, I'll make a point of sending you a message. Thank you. Mamuka is saying, Nikka, Nas. I love Taketsura Pure Malt, Black Label, and Nikka from the barrel. Well, I've got the non-age statement Taketsura there. It's been a long time since I've been able to afford anything with an age statement on it, but it's no bad. Stefan Novak is saying they develop in precisely defined layers, Aquaviti. That's not from me, it's from Dave Broom. Yeah, I've not got Dave Broom's book, but I've heard it's a good book, the one where he goes into, and I like that line that he uses where Scotch is like a babbling brook, a stream that's kind of tumbling and things, and Japanese whiskey is like a calm pond. I like that analogy, and it does make absolute perfect sense to me. But there is, and somehow in that pond there is detail. There is detail. Dorpass Whiskey's bought me a dram. Sorry, as you go through Miyagikyo, see if you find similarities to Glengoyne. It's yin to Yoichi's yang. Oh, wow. And Alex E has bought me a dram as well. Sorry, Alex, I thought I missed that. Bumping into a fellow barfly, Graham Fraser, today by chance. Great day out at Rassie. Thanks for creating this great community, Roy. I didn't create it. You did. Okay, the space is mine, but I need you to come in and hang out in the space. The fact, just seeing all of these kind of meetings of people, like Doc walking through Inverness this week, and Connell McKenzie from Hard Working out for a jog, and Connell's pointing to Doc and saying, "You're a barfly, I know you." Just fantastic to hear. Gregor Dykeman and Petehead Frank bumping into each other on the Isle of Ferry, and you bumping into Graham Fraser as well, Alex. It's just tremendous to hear. Thank you, Alex, for the dram, and thanks, Tim, Dorpass Whiskey as well. Cheers to you both. And cheers to this amazing community. I can't wait to have quite a visceral experience with it a week on Saturday. I never turned down a taste of the Yoichi, but it's $100 in my neighborhood, Aquaviti, says Rob Smith. $100. So what's that? It's about 75. It's about the same here. So I'll ask you the question, Rob. When you enjoy that Yoichi, where else do you go for £75 or 100 of your dollars to get that same taste? To get that same flavor experience, to get that same thing. The Miyagikyo is cheaper in the Netherlands than the Yoichi. Good for you. So that's Claudius Access to Scotch has got a wee bargain going on the Miyagikyo, or at least I hope it's a bargain. Let's keep the ball rolling here. Let's keep it going, because all of these whiskies are getting opened and I'm excited about them all. Let's come a wee bit. We've been to Tasmania, then we've gone up to Eastern Asia, right? And we're going to come all the way back to the British Isles now. We're going to go into Ireland. Ireland, I can't keep up. If you've been watching the vPub for long enough, you'll know that I've got, it's wrong to call it a fetish or a guilty pleasure. I've got a love, a passion for pot still Irish, single pot still Irish whiskey. I have loved it. I loved it when it was inexpensive and easy to pick up for reasonable prices. I remember the yellow spot being 40 something pounds. It's double that now. I love the green spot. I even love the 40% standard green spot, non-age statement, 40% ABV. There's nothing like it out there. It's a wee bit pricey now, so it's a think before I buy. I've got the Chateau Montelena, the Chateau Leval Barton. I'm loving the spots, let's say. I would love to get my hands on a blue spot. I've got the gold spot there, which is overpriced. Don't enjoy the gold spot, but the blue spot, the early samples I tried, let's say, I loved. Never been able to get a bottle. Single pot still Irish for me is fascinating, and there is a huge renaissance in single pot still Irish right across the country. They're making malt whiskey out there. They're making different grains. They're making rye. They're doing everything. They're peated whiskies. But single pot still Irish seems to be this core, and it's never gone away. It's always been made, but it ended up in blends. What's happened now is that there is so many single pot still Irish whiskies out there that somebody like me can't keep up. Look at what's happened to Redbreast. It's exploded. Powers John's Lane, probably still the best. If somebody said, recommend one, it used to be the yellow spot for me, but now, because of pricing, it's Powers John's Lane, a 12-year-old, 46%, fantastically. Probably the most kind of spiced single pot still Irish for me too. Fabulous stuff. And of course, I'm just talking about one distillery. I'm talking about Middleton. All of the whiskies I've just mentioned to you is from one distillery. The only one available, I believe, back in the 1980s was Green Spot. It nearly died out. As a product that made it to the retail shelves, it nearly died out. It was always still being made. Pot still whiskey in Ireland is always continually being made, but it just wasn't presented for sale, and it was perceived that there was no demand for it. But what's happening now, this is incredible, to the point that they're even getting their creative shoes on. And for a few years now, we've had this crazy, interesting range of all sorts of whiskies coming out from Middleton under their Method and Madness range. So this is a single pot still Irish here. You can see down the bottom there, if you look, it's finished in French Chestnut. French Chestnut, I've tried the Bog Oak, didn't like it much. French Chestnut, didn't want to touch it with a barge pole. But you guys are pretty insistent. So you send wee samples to me. You say, Roy, that Chestnut, it's a good one, it's a good one, it's a good one. Okay, so it's time that I listen. So I went out and I spent a fair bit of money on this. I've got the prices written down here, what I pay for the Method and Madness. This is up at the same price as those two Japanese whiskies, the Yoichi and the Miyagikyo, and that's asking this whiskey to work hard. Now, you could argue that this is very small scale, low outturn, limited edition, but this one's been around for, these Chestnut finishes have been around for a long time. Some of the Method Madness are actually very well priced. This one is probably a wee bit more expensive. Perfect. Got a nice cork. Same Method and Madness at the top. It's quite a nice bottle, actually, a wee bit Art Deco. Is that octagonal? Maybe more. A fair bit of information on it. It does tell us that it's non-chill filtered on the back. Tells us how much energy we can derive from this glass of whiskey. I mean, if I was needing energy, whiskey would not be the thing I'm drinking. But I guess it's perhaps Irish or EU legislation out there. I guess that they've got to put that on the label. I'm not sure. But this is the first time that I'll have tried anything more than just a passing sample of anything in chestnut wood, right? Now, Irish whiskey does not need to be aged in oak, hence why they can still write single pot still Irish whiskey on the label here, despite it having a French chestnut finish. Scotch whiskey needs to be exclusively oak. So we may have, cherry wood, acacia, chestnut, all of these things that we might have experimented with in the past. And there are stories that there are these wee kind of orphaned casks out there in warehouses all over the place, and these strange woods. I don't believe it. They would have been decanted a long time ago, but we can't do that in Scotland. In Ireland and in other places, they certainly can. This is completely different. I don't want to be so that my immediate initial impression, because of the order I'm sipping these in tonight, I've just come back off that lovely Japanese, put my nose in this, and I'm getting, it's very, very casky, but more than that, I'm getting a wee bit of soap. Now, I'm not suggesting this is bad. I'm not suggesting this is ridiculously off-putting, but it is a wee bit like floral hand soap. Herbaceous, green, you know the type of soap I'm speaking about. Rosemary, lavender, that kind of thing. Very fragrant. A little bit of spice. Can I get past the floral side? Can I get past the flowers? Can I get past the lavender? I'm seeing fresh flowers. Hunt past a wee bit spice and a bit of toffee. Lots of toffee, caramel, butterscotch. Let's just go in for a sip. Soft arrival, quickly flips into spice. Nice spice. Definitely cinnamon, nutmeg. Obviously so. All that soap and floral thing doesn't really express on the palate. On the palate, a bit of ginger there too. On the palate, it's all about the wood spices, the cooking spices. Searching for fruit, I'll go on again. It is very casky. With single pot still Irish, I'm always looking for this really kind of oily weight, this kind of gloopiness almost that you can get, this really interesting texture that the whatever proportion of unmalted barley they've used in the mash bill gives you that kind of oiliness, that gloopiness, but not really. This isn't expressing like that. This is more of a cask thing on the palate. Stick your nose in. Now that I've tasted it, I'm getting much more of the cask. Notes I've been sharing with you. Still searching for fruit. We'll go with kind of more kind of aromatic things like berries. It's actually nice. I haven't worked hard on the back of that Miyagikyo, no doubt, but this is a completely different animal. This is, we're not comparing apples for apples here. This is, and I don't know if this is natural color, it doesn't tell us, but this is pretty dark whiskey. I hope you can see, you can maybe pick out just how dark that whiskey is. I'm maybe able to put up a piece of white paper. I usually have a piece of white paper around here. We go. And even with a bit of white paper behind it, you can see that it's really, it looks like iron brew orange there if I hold it up against the white paper. It's not like that. It's just how it is on the camera. It's much more kind of copper coloured in the bottle. I would love this to be natural colour. I would love these colours to have come from whatever oak it was in beforehand, potentially first fill bourbon, potentially virgin, I don't know, before it went into that chestnut. Maybe this colour is coming from the chestnut wood. I really don't know. But the chances are they've maybe put in a dot of colour here, which is a shame because with something as experimental as this, you really want the colour to be part of the play. It could be natural, but they need to tell us that it's naturally coloured. Maybe you guys know. But more than anything, most of the notes and the experience is very woody. It's not a bad thing. We love our cask notes, right? We love our vanilla, we love our toffee, our caramel, we love our coconut. If it's from a sherry cask, we love all the spice and the dark fruit, the cooked fruit. We love we love these things that wood can bring to whiskey. It doesn't make it bad. And not every whiskey has to be balanced. You know, we love our spirit-driven whiskies. We love our spirit-forward things too. On the arrival, it's so soft. It's the finish that's got that spice, drying spice. It's not tannic, so the wood isn't too heavy. There is a wee bit of tan in there, on the wee bit of black tea on the finish, a wee bit of... This is good whiskey. The bad news is, for Method Madness, I don't think it's 75, 76 quid's worth of good whiskies. That what I paid, £77. £77. There's too much wood heavy stuff in Scotch right now. And I don't mean wood heavy in a negative way. If that's your profile, if that's your lane, enjoy it, drink it, love it, own it. But there's too much of it for £50 and less right now to go up against this and compete with this. I'm thinking about that really lively, enjoyable Glenallachie 8-year-old that I enjoyed so much last year. There's so much of it around. £76. Listen, I appreciate that this is an experimental thing, Method Madness. It's probably got a bit of a cult following as well. All these kind of cool, interesting things that they're doing. And I do need to caveat once more, again, like I do with all of these, that I will need to go back and spend more time with this. But where I am compelled, I can't wait to the next time I pour another glass of that Miyagikyo. There's still some in the glass here. This one is going to be like, okay, I'll get round to that when it pops up in conversation or whatever again. Not bad. Pretty good. Let's keep the chat, see what's happening in the chat, and then keep the pace going a wee bit. Graham Young is saying, gloopiness, new aquavite note to me. Hopefully it's expressive and you know what I mean, but it's that kind of, it's got the weight, it's got the viscous, it's got the kind of roundness. The Whiskey Rev used to say slippy. Donald Rance is saying, oh hell yes, my favourite of the Method Madness range, the wild cherrywood, mulberry and acacia stuff was a bit weird. I love the waxy fruit roll-up characteristic the chestnut brings. Waxy fruit. I was struggling to find fruit. Oh, you're thinking about the waxy fruit roll-up, the chew. Okay, that makes sense. That's the berry thing, right? That makes perfect sense, Donald. Absolutely. Chestnut coloured. Yeah, almost, Jimmy. Donald's saying, it's natural colouring from what I've been told. That would be amazing. Put it in a bottle and we can all enjoy it instead of it being kind of word of mouth. We believe it to be the case. And Donald is saying again, tealing chestnut cask is just as dark. So these could be natural colour. Pre-World War II, it was not uncommon to mature cognac in chestnut casks. Brilliant, Stefan. So this is not a new thing to put spirits in chestnut wood, right? And Whiskey Weekend Dram, good to see you, Harrow. He's just popped in and saying hello, Roy and Barflies. Good to welcome you, Harrow. And Justin Rand is saying, allow me to suggest that heavily peated whiskies are not balanced. The heavily peated whiskies can be balanced, but in what direction? Balance isn't just, it can be balanced this way and all over the place, right? Just think of for me, a heavily sherried peated whiskey can have balance. It can have balance between the kind of heavy sherried. It just works. And heavy peat. And balance is also, I don't think it's particularly objective. Some of it can be. But I think a lot of when we talk about balance, it can be subjective too. Anyway, I've not missed any. No, good. Let's keep the pace up because I'm doing okay. Doing okay. An hour and 14 in. I've got 3 more to go. We'll get through these quickly. The one I'm going to bring up to you now is from a shelf in my section here it's got all the whiskies from that country in that little shelf. But I don't call it after the country, I call it after the person who's donated most of the bottles that exist on that shelf. I've mentioned it before, it's Graham Young. And Graham Young's Canadian. And often if we meet up in Scotland, or if we meet up in Glasgow, he'll bring along some treats. He's always carrying something, and occasionally that's a bottle of whiskey. And this was one of those. This is interestingly controversial quite recently. This is Macaloney's Caledonian. This is the Glenloy expression. It's not the standard Glenloy. This is a cask strength version. You might be able to see down here, it's 57.81% ABV. Batch number 5, 391, 371, that might say, bottle outturn. So there's not a lot of this cask strength stuff. However, the standard 46% Macaloney's Caledonian Glenloy, it's not going to be around forever, I'll get to that in a second, is available in the UK. And it's not too expensive, you know, it's not cheap, it's in the 60s or thereabouts, £70, that kind of order. But there's this Canadian whiskey from way over the west coast of Canada, Vancouver Island, right, is available in the UK. Now, Macaloney's, it's not been going for a long time, but recently they got into a lot of controversy because of the name Macaloney's Caledonian. The Scotch Whisky Association decided that Macaloney's Caledonian was trying to be Scotch. It was trying to play like Scotch. Forget about the fact that Graham Macaloney is the founder. That's his actual name. Sounds more Irish to me than Scottish, or just as Irish as Scottish. I think their complaint was about the use of the word Caledonian. Okay, I get it. But really? Now they've renamed themselves Macaloney's Island Distillery instead. But Graham's has brought me this really nice, pretty rare little cask strength version of the 46% stuff that we can pick up in the UK. That's amazing to me. But I want to talk about the gift thing. Anybody that gives me a gift, I know that this isn't even a consideration for them. But when you decide that you're going to be independent and you're going to give opinions about whiskey, you're going to say no to gifts from, you're not going to accept freebies. I don't accept freebies on the channel. You all know that. But what about when the community gives you gifts? You don't want to be impolite. You don't want to be critical about things that people have given you. But my community know what I do for a living, and the word is community. So if this is an awful whiskey, the next time I see Graham, I'll shake his hand and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't like that Caledonian. If it's an excellent whiskey, I'll be genuine. And if it's probably always going to be somewhere in between, let's be honest. But just to make it clear, just because these gifts have come from the community, the friendship endures. It can survive past a reaction to a bottle or a glass of whiskey, honestly. Anyway, here goes. A good glug, Graham. It's a good start. Nice dark colour coming out of this one. That's for sure. And I believe Macaloney's to be fully natural. I don't know if they tell us on the packaging. A lot of people, premium, okay, that we've got ex-bourbon, recharred, red wine, and sherry cask. So quite a vatting here. It's only 371 bottles. It's kind of strange. So they must kind of do remarriage in cask or something. But this is the whiskey maker's signature expression. Canadian single malt whiskey. It says that it's non-chill filtered, but it doesn't tell us about colour. I wish people would just be a wee bit more relaxed about saying that it's natural colour. This is very casky again. I don't know if I've had that Japanese whiskey that kind of, and it's just kind of thrown everything into me focusing on the oak side of things. Just in the saying, I didn't realise it was still an issue with Macaloney's. Ralphie was bringing that to our attention some time ago. No, it's been settled now. They were maybe in court. I don't know if they made it to court, but they settled out of court. And Macaloney's, much like the same way that you might remember that Box Distillery had to change their name to High Coast through potential legal action from Compass Box and the people behind Compass Box. You might remember the famous story with Glenora Distillery in the east of Canada. They've settled out of court, and Macaloney's have now changed their name from Macaloney's Caledonian to just Macaloney's Island Distillery. And Graham is saying, I'm assured from Graham Macaloney himself that these are all natural, no colour or chill filtration. It says no chill filtration on the label, Graham, so spot on. So this is quite rich. This is the darkest whiskey we've sipped tonight. Syrupy. citric, sweet, dark citric oil, orange, sweet orange. There is some wood notes in there. There is some wood spice. Some tannins. Cheers, Graham. Cheers to you. Oh, wow. Coffee, chocolate, mocha, immediate lots of spice. The high ABV makes itself known, brings lots of spice, brings a nice lick of heat to it, wee bit of chili pepper. Adding to all that wood spice just amps up the heat. So it's kind of this soft arrival of the kind of chocolatey notes in the coffee. And the finish is coffee now. It's a cold coffee in the finish. And then it just kind of ramps immediately up to this big, massive blast of spice. What's incredible is what's happening in Canada right now. If you think of the established whiskey brands globally, the categories that's always existed, Irish whiskey has always been a thing. Scotch whiskey has always been a thing. In the last 30 plus years, we've seen Japanese whiskey become a thing. Bourbon has always been a thing. Alongside all of those, we've had Canadian rye. Canadian whiskey has always kind of been there. Depending on where you travel in the world, it's either popular or not so popular, but it's always been there. What's happening in Canadian whiskey right now is the exact same explosion that we are seeing in every other country. I started to dig through and look up Canadian, and I'm speaking not here about the large-scale Canadian distilling that we're used to, the Hiram Walkers of the past and these big, massive plants. I'm speaking about much more artisanal, smaller scale craft distilling of single malts, distilling of interesting takes on different ryes, peated, unpeated spirits. You quickly find yourself in a rabbit hole again and realize it's just another country where the whiskey is just exploding. This whiskey in front of me tonight is not like I've got Shelter Point down there, I've got two brewers, I've got lots of Canadian ryes, and when I say Canadian rye, I mean actually distilled from rye or majority rye whiskies. They taste like they're Canadian whiskies to a certain extent. This, to me, is like a richer, syrupier, sweeter, slightly sweeter homage to Scotch. This is a wee bit reminiscent to some of the whiskies that's coming out from the likes of Westland. To my palate, it's quite similar. The richness, the oakiness. It's not bad. It's not tannic. It's not bitter. It's not acidic. It's not sharp. It's not ugly. It's easy to drink. But the notes are sweet wood notes, sweet and spiced wood notes. This is helped hugely by that ABV. The boldness, the richness, the weight, the long finish. This whiskey cannot be any more than 7 years old. Macaloney's, even when it was still called Caledonian, was founded in 2016. This is even newer than Ardnamurchan. This is brand new whiskey. If you put this down on someone and ask them to guess the age, they would be putting it, I think, they would be putting it in the 10 years plus bracket. It's more wood in profile. It's not a bad thing, as I've already said when I was talking about the Method Madness. but it's another compelling, beautiful. I wonder what you would have to pay here in the UK for the cask strength version. As I mentioned to you, it's 60 to 70 pounds for the stuff that we can buy here. That's not what I'm trying tonight. This is the cask strength version. And it's another cracking whiskey. Are we seeing a pattern here? These are all, so far, everything that we've tried are all real threats to any Scotch drinker, any Scotch whisky collector, any Scotch whisky selection that's sitting there that you enjoy dipping into. All of the whiskies I'm sharing with you are threats, but despite what we continually complain about with the prices in Scotch going like this, if we were to get off the Scotch ladder and look elsewhere to find alternatives, the only thing that we would solve is not drinking Scotch anymore. We would still have to pay just as much money in 2023. All of these so far are expensive products. And the next two I'm going to share with you is only going to make that even worse. Strap in. Peter Lacey, and I'm having the Macaloney's Glenloy that Graham Young gifted me too. I've shared it well. Powerful, sweet and spicy. My bottle is 57.8% ABV. Peter, we're drinking the same thing. I hope that as I was going through those tasting notes, that you were able to pick up some of this stuff. It's amazing how generous Graham Young has been, and he's dished out not just one, but two of those. I hope you're enjoying it. Aquavite says, well, Jerky, not a threat to Scotch whisky drinkers, but the Scotch distilleries. But this is my point, is that if we decide then, I think that the reason that we can't buy Tasmanian whiskey here, I think the reason that we can't buy Japanese whiskey here, I think that the reason we can't buy Canadian whiskey here are all those wonderful North American whiskies that's coming out. And there's more I'm going to get through. I've still got another two whiskies to share with you tonight. And I predict that they're both going to be fantastic. I hope that they are. The problem is that they're being snapped up domestically wherever they are made. The fervour for whiskey right now, generally across the world, if you're Tasmanian, you're loving your Tasmanian whiskies. If you're in New Zealand or Australia or anywhere around there, you're snapping up whatever you can get. If you're in New Zealand, you're snapping up New Zealand whiskey right now. If you're in Canada, you're buying your domestic product. If you're in America, you're buying your domestic product. The prices for us as Scotch drinkers in Scotland and in the UK, these are prohibitive. Everything I've shared with you tonight is cost prohibitive for us. The problem comes that Scotch and the success of Scotch has been built on export markets. And all of that domestic fervour for the domestic product is clearly going to cannibalize that, because there isn't enough money to go around. There's not enough shelf space to go around. There's not enough liver capacity to go around to be able to drink all that domestic product wherever you are in the world, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and the Americas, and still allocate enough of that liver, wallet, shelf space, real estate, whatever it is, to your Scotch passion as well. It's just, there isn't enough capacity out there. Surely, maybe today in 2023, when everything's kind of small and just growing and blossoming, still really quite granular, and we talk about scale. But in the very near future, that's going to change. If Scotch and all of Scotch marches out and decides that domestically it's going to charge what these imported products are charging, that's a disaster. Because all of these products are much more affordable domestically where they are. And I hope that Scotch always remembers that. They cannot set their prices because somebody's willing to spend £80 on an knowledge statement Japanese. It's because it's Japanese and they'll buy one or two and that's it. But if it's Scotch and if it's 50 quid, they'll buy a whole shelf load. Dorpass Whisky is saying, agreed, for 10-year plus age-dated, non-chill filtered, natural colour, single malt, Scotland is still the best value. And Jean Kelly saying, there are so many problems with the integrity of foodstuffs and consumables coming out of China that I'd never consider a Chinese whiskey, should that ever materialise. That's an interesting one. They would have to have some kind of harmonized conformity in place. No Rolex is here. Good to see you. Saying Sonoma Cherrywood Rye is well worth a try. Well, I've got a Kings County rye down there that is almost rinsed because I'm loving it so much. The reason that I've only got a wee bit left in the bottle is that I need to keep it for Gregor McQueen the next time he's here to show him that not all rye is the devil's grain, right? Donald Rance is saying the opposite problem right now is the price of Scotch has skyrocketed. So a lot of us outside the UK are looking to the domestic alternatives that are better value for money. Hallelujah. You've nicked my punchline, but that's okay, Donald. So if the domestic product, you're enjoying it locally at better prices, and the people in Scotland are looking at what people are paying for these Japanese whiskies and these Tasmanian whiskies and thinking, my God, we're underselling our product, they've lost perspective completely. Because if the prices are amped up domestically here, I mean, it's just, this is just me sitting in my spare room talking to you, but this is what the feedback I'm getting from the community all the time. We're struggling to afford it these days. Sometimes it's not down to the industry here, and I say that industry, that big catch-all word again, industry. Sometimes it's not down to the decisions that's made here or at the source of export, let's say. Sometimes it's down to the distribution, the importers and agents and the supply network, the retail network, whatever it may be. There's lots of points in the chain where the prices can be hiked up based on perception, based on immediate short-term opportunism. But it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous. We're in a quickening right now where there is just so much whiskey. I paid a lot of money for the next bottle I'm going to share with you, but it's very, very pretty. And I've been very keen to get my hands on this for a long time, and I was glad to finally find one for sale in the UK. Wait for it. Discounted. I'm going to try and hold this up without it falling out, but we've got here a very, very pretty little bottle of New Zealand malt whiskey, their Cardrona. This is the Growing Wings, 64% ABV. This is still cask strength. But this is the closest that they have to a core product. Now, you might say, why is all the Cardronas like this? Why is it all these wee bottles? Why is everything single cask? And if it's not single cask, this isn't single cask, this is a vatting, but why is it still in a small bottle? And why is it still at cask strength and things? And I started to think, and I should have looked into this, but I think they've probably just not got vatting and a bottling hall and all the kind of infrastructure that's in place around distilling in Scotland, all the infrastructure and resources that we have in order to function and do these things and contract out the things that we can't do in-house. If you're starting from scratch like they are in New Zealand, you probably maybe don't have that stuff. And what they're having to do just now, because it's just functionally easier for them, and this is just me shooting from the hip, I'm probably way off the mark, but they're just doing what they can. Cardrona is a pretty new distillery. Again, it's younger than Ardnamurchan. Cardrona is 2015. But already they've made a hell of a name. Everybody knows the name Cardrona globally. They're doing great stuff down there in New Zealand. I hope I've managed to open this. Or so I hear. I've had one or two wee samples. I've had one or two wee tastes. During lockdown, managed to get a couple of Cardronas and quite enjoyed it. Look at all the time I spent with a knife cutting that seal. And it's got a wee pull tab here. All I had to do was pull the pull tab and I would have got it open. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, let's get some of this Growing Wings into the glass and try some. My first bottle of New Zealand whiskey. I'll tell you how much I paid for this, because if you go online right now to Whiskey Specialists, you're going to be lucky to find a bottle of Cardrona, albeit it's probably going to be single cask bottlings. But you're going to find it hard to get. Even a wee half bottle like this. This is 350 ml, 375. How much is in this? 350 ml is in this. Tiny, tiny writing. Bet the camera can't even focus on that to pick it up. Well, it can. I can actually read that better in there than I can in real life. 64.9% ABV, it says on the back label. And indeed, it says that in the front as well. I thought it was just 64.9% ABV. Wow. But 350ml bottle. Most of these are over £100 in the UK for a half bottle. So you scale that up to a full 70cl bottle, you're speaking about £200 for this. But this is a £77 bottle. 77 for this Growing Wings, this vatted one. And this is a vatting of sherry and bourbon casks. If you read the blurb on the back, it says that it's ex Oloroso, ex Pedro Jimenez, and bourbon barrels. But right now you can buy this at Waitrose for £63. It's on offer. So I saw that it was on offer at £63 and I decided to gamble and buy it. £63, that's up there with the other whiskies I've been talking to you tonight about. It's a lot of money. And it's a half bottle. This may be a pretty thing, but in the UK, it's been asked to work very, very hard. So in the UK, this is still at the point of curiosity. So New Zealand whiskey is still at such a small scale that it's very expensive, but there's so little of it that people are willing to pay it. And this is another problem we're seeing in Scotch. People are saying, well, if they're willing to pay £100 plus for a half bottle of New Zealand whiskey, we're underselling again. But real, true, small-scale scarcity is not the same as just putting out a limited quantity of bottles from a huge backstock. It's very, very different. £63 for 30cl, bargain not, says Whiskey with Molly. I'm not going to try and dress it up as anything else. It's $350, so it is a half bottle, but you're spot on. It's too expensive. Still, this is the first Cardrona, so if anybody's going to buy a bottle of Cardrona and tell you what it's like, it should potentially be someone like me, right, Ben? 64.9%. I'm strapping in for this one. Okay, the ABV is making itself quite apparent on the nose. I should probably be reducing this. Oh, jeez. Does need water. So I'm getting lots of syrup, lots of golden syrup, lots of sweet syrup, maple syrup, honey. Yeah, some floral things coming in too. But quite, despite that ABV being obvious, the suggestion behind it is actually quite a delicate thing. Something quite soothing and calm about this. Let's go. Wow. Okay. In Scotland, we've got this climate, this cool, damp, humid climate. It doesn't matter whether it's in first fill or refill or whatever it is, but we've got this kind of, it really needs, it needs, Scotch whisky has become the profile that it is with the element of time. This is in the South Island of New Zealand, away down there in the south. And you would think that, okay, they're going to have the same thing. But this is a distillery, 2015, I think, Cardrona. So I don't know how old this actually is, this whiskey in this, but I'm going to guess it's something like of the order of 6 or 7 years old at best. And there is no way that somehow with the crafting of this whiskey, they've been able to take away most of the suggestions of youth. Even when I'm sipping this at 65, close to 65% ABV, there is something together about this whiskey. Integrated. I'm going to put a nice scoosh of water into this one. Got the wee jug ready. I knew that one or two would need a bit of water. I mean, I'm using a dropper for this, but honestly, we'll just go straight in with a jug with this. It's 65%. And what you just watch it kind of, it's like a storm in a glass when you pour the water and you just see it react immediately. Give it a little swirl. Toffee, caramel, butterscotch, everything starts to come forward with the water. But interestingly, what's popping up is a wee bit of spice with the floral notes now as well. So the water has kind of broken things a wee bit, but released a wee bit of the spices that were hidden. So we've got some kind of soft things, like really quite soft kind of nutmeg and what's those kind of pseudo chocolate sweets, Jolly Ranchers are they called? I can't remember. Definitely chocolate. I cannot encourage anyone to go out and spend £63 or whatever, £77 if it's not on offer for a half bottle of whiskey. But this is very, very well made whiskey. It's very obviously well made whiskey. It's very together. It's very clean. It's very profound. If this wasn't made in such tiny quantities that they have to pour it around the world in half bottles, whiskey like this, as soon as whiskey like this can be scaled up, the prices have to tumble over the world. The prices have to come down. If they can make whiskey like this at scale, wherever you are, the whiskey future for you is bright. I'm not suggesting that we'll be able to afford New Zealand whiskey in Scotland, and I'm not suggesting that there's ever a time anytime soon that you're going to get cheap Scotch whiskey in New Zealand, good quality Scotch whiskey in New Zealand. But if this is whiskey's future, whiskies like this, maybe not complex, maybe needs a bit of time, a bit of detail, a bit of something else to come in. Just a wee bit of water rendered it from something that was really quite challenging to suddenly something that's super elegant, super soft. Whiskey with Molly Ben, the price just turns me off completely. I actually don't care how good it is. I'm not paying that price. That's my point, exactly why I am the one sitting here doing it. But Ben, the next time that you and I meet up, if you remind me, I'll pour a wee bit into this, a sample for you, and you can try it. At least say you've tried it. I got the Cardrona for £40 at an auction. Honestly, an absolute steal. I found it very barrel forward. It needs water. I agree, it doesn't taste young at all. I think most of the notes that I've been picking out with the last 2 or 3 whiskies tonight, the Method and Madness, the Macalonies, and the Cardrona, have been mostly, obviously, cask forward notes. But most of the whiskies that we're sipping have been young whiskies. In fact, all of them, without exception, have been non-age stated. With the last whiskey I'm going to share with you tonight, that changes, and it's quite a profound change as well. Whiskey with Molly is saying, I've had it at festivals. It's decent, not amazing, but like Inchtairney, I was semi-interested till I heard the price. You and I both, £105 or something that is now for the Inchtairney. You know, there's an argument I should be buying that as well, just to kind of talk to you about it, but I've just been so reticent. Greg's Whiskey Guide says, I thought we had an Old Alliance, Scots and French's, Roy. Still no French whiskey in your list. you can find tips about which ones in many of my videos, mind you. Okay, a bit provoking. Don't worry, I don't mind if you're here to provoke, Greg. French whiskey as well. You know, we're in the realms of, you know, I don't know, remember the number, the factoid that we had for a recent vPub quiz at the end? I think we were somewhere up in the stupid, like 70 or 80 French distilleries as well. The whole world is going nuts. First World Whiskey is in from New Zealand, Cardrona as a bottled and distilled date. So here we go. I've got the bottle number. Buddy, if it's single cask, I think you're right. But this is not a single cask, so I don't think it has that on it. This is the sherry and bourbon cask, Growing Wings. I'll hold that up. I'll hold the back label up for you, Phil. I don't think this does, and there was no paperwork or box or anything. Well, there was a cardboard box and the wooden frame around it, and you can see from the front here as well that there's no... I mean, I have missed details from a bottle before, but I think because this is a vatting, this is the lower cost one, I think you'll have a bottling and a distillation date on the single cask stuff, the north of £100 stuff. But this one at £77, the vatting with the kind of higher scale one, maybe doesn't have that detail. Greg's Whisky Guide is saying Falsgraph is saying to Greg's Whisky Guide and me, the French distillery is still good. I'd love a vPub on Armoric. Wow. First Phil Whiskey is saying, you're correct. Mine's different. Yeah, slightly different bottlings. Yep, where's the Edu? Says Black Fen. And listen, I don't have all the world whiskies. I don't have all the representations. I have a cookie trailer, what I'm interested in, what's been gifted to me from the community. But it's amazing how they are all kind of harbingers of change in whiskey. Imminent change in whiskey. If you consider where we were 10 years ago, none of the whiskies that I've shared with you, with the exception of Miyagikyo, even existed. It's fascinating. The next one to come up did exist 10 years ago. In fact, the only thing that's older here tonight is the 1969 founding year of Miyagikyo. Obviously, Middleton's been around for a long time, well, the 70s at least, but, you know, let's say Irish distillers having a big distillery in Ireland has been around for a long time. But the new distillery is a 70s product. Macaloney's 2016, Cardrona 2015, Lark, okay, that's been around since 1992 in some form or another. That's been around for a long time. Miyagikyo 1969, that's quite mature now. The one I'm going to share with you now has been around almost as long as Miyagikyo. 1972. It's been making malt whiskey since 1972. I don't know how many of you have heard of this product. I've tasted it once before. I think I tasted this from a Cadenhead's bottling, one of their World Whiskies bottlings, and only one dram, only one pour from the bottle. I've no memory of it, I've no recollection, and therefore no opinion of it. But this bottle was gifted to me from Rafael Nardi, a barfly who's out in Brazil. He sent this across to me through the hands of Andre de Almeida, the guy behind, the writer, the whiskey writer and travel guy behind Inside the Cask. He mailed it over to Scotland for me. He lives in Scotland. And we couldn't meet up, so he dropped it at the Bon Accord for me, and I picked it up sometime later at the Bon Accord. Amazing how these things can happen. But what we have here is Brazilian whiskey from Rafael in Brazil. This is Brazilian Union single malt whiskey. And as you can see across the front, this is vintage 2005, and you can see the date underneath it, to 2022. So we have 17-year-old Brazilian whiskey. So we're not just talking about something like the Miyagikyo that's been around since, 50 years. This has been around 50 years, but the Miyagikyo is non-age. And with this Union Brazil distillery, this is different. This has been around for a long time, making malt whiskey, by the way, decades ago, with input from Morrison Bowmore, with input from the Scotch whisky industry as well, to help perfect their techniques, their systems, their production. But we've now got stock in South America of mature whiskey. That's one of the things I was pointing out that's unique for Scotch, that is becoming, it's not unique, but it's unique for Scotch to have the scale. Ireland, they've lost that. A lot of their mature stocks is so low, it's just so scarce and so expensive. Unobtainium, not affordable for mere mortals. Same with Japanese whiskey. Mature Scotch is getting that way, but there's still much more of it around than any other whiskey on the planet. Here we have a Brazilian distillery with mature stock. Let's see how this pops. It's a difficult to hold bottle. Quite a muted pop, but I guarantee you it's going to glug when it comes out this flask, surely. Surely. Nope. Yep. So there we go. Huge thanks to Raphael Nardi. You're a superstar to be able to source and get this to me. One of only 2,000 bottles of this outturn, I believe. And then to Andre as well for muling it all the way across to Scotland for me. 17-year-old New World whiskey. These are different times that we are living in today. They don't have dunnage warehouses, do they, in Union? There's age on this. Immediately it's leather pouch, some kind of dusky bookstore type note. Bizarrely, some of that kind of acetone thing that I talked about at the start of tonight when I was in the Lark. Just that kind of sense of being a New World whiskey. But there's age here. There's something old here. Leather pouch, did I say that already? Suede leather. Polished, kind of treated leather and wood. Slightly dusty note, a slightly almost like a dusty herb or a herbaceous dry thing. Green, grey, subtle. I think you would nose this and think you were potentially had your face in mature Scotch. I really believe that. Much more vibrant than I expected. Excellent. So I'm going to check the ABV here. This is a higher ABV than I expected. I was going into this thinking 43, 46. I think it's a wee bit higher than that, but not hot, not jaggy, just much more vibrant, much more alive on the palate than I expected. Definitely aromatic, a little bit kind of a wee bit heady and almost weird, a wee bit herbaceous, a wee bit of that acetone thing kicking in. This, I take back what I said about nosing a Scotch, that you would sit with this glass, you sit it for a couple of sips, a couple of minutes, I'm sure you would say, okay, we're not in Scotch anymore. But you're certainly in something that's well put together. .48% ABV. It's excellent. 48%, 75 cl, 750ml bottle. No chance I can figure out the value of this. I looked at it on Whiskey Base. This is actually, it does appear on Whiskey Base, or a version of it does appear on there, and they suggest a market value on Whiskey Base of €95. So if €95, we're talking about £85. If that's the case, let's imagine if I was able to pick this up at £85, I think we'd be looking at the best value of the night. There's a sense that this is a rare whiskey. This is a decadent thing. There's a lusciousness to this. There's a depth to this. There's something, it's difficult to articulate, but you probably understand what I'm trying to get across. The ABV is, there's a wee bit of kind of that acetone thing kicking in there, just a wee whiff of oil paints, but it's difficult to tease out, you know, the fruit from the wood spice, from the spice, from the, you know, it's all together. It's very, very, there's detail. It's complex. These are difficult. Thank you for indulging me. Thank you for indulging me. I don't know. Is it fun sitting watching somebody just drinking lovely, lovely whiskies? The way I let you down is that my inability to cleanly articulate these experiences. This is nothing like anything I've had tonight. and yet very similar in so many ways. The thing that separates this against everything I've had, and the reason I put in a sixth when I said I was only going to do 5, is suddenly world whiskies have got something that we thought Scotland only had, and that was mature stock. I'm not saying it's affordable. I'm not saying it's on the map. I'm not saying it is Scotch or can compete with Scotch, but the changing landscape is, the shift is happening right in front of our eyes very, very, very quickly. How many of you have heard of Union Brazil? How many of you have heard of that distillery? Do you know the scale of it? Do you know how big it is? Do you know what it's capable of? Do you know how much potential stock, aged stock it possibly has? It's just incredible to consider. Coca-Cola, sweet. Super, just flashes of flavor, difficult to tie down. I'm not going to get to bed early tonight because I've got something in all of these glasses, but I'm not going to sit here and drink them in front of you. I've given you my impression. Hopefully you're picking up the point I'm trying to make here tonight is that the whiskey landscape is changing fast. Scotland is still super. We've got the width, we've got the flavour spectrum, we've got unique landscape, we've got the history, we've got the depth of stock, we've got the variation in brands, the variation in flavour profiles. We've got everything in place. The majority of the producers out there are doing great, and they're doing great by us, and they're bringing integrity forward, interesting whiskies that they stand by. There are other producers out there in Scotch that is treating it like something to milk now, today. And it's brutal to witness, and it's heartbreaking to witness. There are other producers out there in the world right now watching and crafting, and they've been doing it for much longer than any of us are potentially aware of. Black Venison is all good. Always fascinating to hear about new whiskey experiences. Thank you, Conrad. Thanks for being in tonight, buddy. Thomas F. is saying, you're not letting us down. You're sharing your experiences. Open up thinking to new whiskey and new ideas. Thanks, Thomas. Whiskey with Molly saying, according to Google, Union has been making whiskey since 1972. Not just Google, but me. I said that here tonight. I said it, Ben. Sorry, you're allowed to tune out from time to time. And Gene Kelly saying, Thomas says, you hit the mark, brother. Aquavite delivers. Thank you, Gene. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. Donald Francis saying, it jumped. Donald, I was just about to pick up your, I'll get it. Some non-Scotch matured whiskies are great value. As Matt Zitrick and I were discussing when having a JP Wiser's 35-year-old online, how can this be only 160 Canadian dollars and 50% ABV Earl Grey tea? Donald, that's amazing. Again, JP Wiser's 35-year-old Canadian. Craig G is saying, would you say it would be difficult to pick out a Scotch in this lineup? Is it mimicry, the nature of the spirit making process, or do they have their own specific characteristics? So, Craig, I guess another thing that you could talk about is the fact that everything I've sipped tonight, without exception, could be suggested that it's, and there's nothing triple distilled. So there's nothing using unmalted barley in the mash bill alongside the malted barley. So it's much more an homage to the Scotch whiskey making process than it is to Irish, let's say, the oldest two existing whiskies that there are on the planet. None of them are using corn or mixed mash bills, so it's not an homage to bourbon. These are all kind of whiskies, single malt whiskies, made very similar to the way that we like to make single malt in Scotland. Of course, there's some of them are quite playful and different. Some of them are going to have different ideas on age and how old it is before it becomes whiskey, what kind of wood you can mature it in, such as the chestnut that we had tonight. But generally speaking, with the exception of that Irish whiskey, we've got kind of homages, double distilled, pot still, single malt still whiskey, and for the majority aged in oak. And yet, the whiskey's taking care of itself. The whiskey's just being what it's going to be, and it's not going to be Scotch. There are whiskies in the lineup tonight that people could pick out as Scotch, but if I picked a really good Scotch, or even that Craigellachie 13 that I started out with tonight, and I put the Craigellachie 13 in the lineup, I think it would be my guess that not only me, but the majority of you, with a bit of time and peace and quiet and focus and concentration, would separate them out and understand that they're ever so slightly different things, different lenses looking in the same direction. Daniel Williams has gifted 5 Aqua Vitae memberships. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much. Well, I've hit the 2-hour mark, but I've managed to get through 6 whiskies in that time. That suggests 20 minutes per few sips. I'm doing okay. Almost all of the whiskies, I've got some left in the glass that I can enjoy at my leisure once we wind up tonight. I can certainly enjoy these 6 whiskies as we sit and go through the quiz at the end. I know a lot of you will be reaching for your parachute and jumping out the door before we hit that quiz at the end. But please, I encourage you to have a wee bit of fun with it. If you're here to learn and to pick up on the community, the character, the personality of that community, the interaction, what actually happens is you pick up all these wee nuggets and you learn these things, these little, it's almost like learning by osmosis, right? So we like to round out with a quiz at the end. It's always optional. Sharing your score is optional. Even the questions are multiple choice. It's just good fun. There's easy questions in there tonight, and there's challenging questions in tonight. I think, on balance, my prediction is going to be that it's going to be a slightly challenging one tonight. But let's see how you guys get on. Whiskey Boy is saying, sorry if you already covered it, but Westland American Single Malt is the Dog's Danglies. Westland was nearly featured tonight, Whiskey Boy. It really was. I've got Westland over there, and I've got Westward. I've got 2 different styles. So I've got single cask Westward. I've got, and I get a bit like the Canadian Super Shelf that's donated by Graham Young. I've got a Jay Chung shelf over here of North American single malts that's donated by Jay. And he brought over Westward. He brought over Westland. I've got quite a few over there, and a few of them are already open, and some of them have featured in previous vPubs, and very enjoyable they were too. Interesting stuff. The chat just jumped quickly there. Sorry, but Whiskey Boy, that looks like a new name. It's nice to welcome you in. Glad I caught your comment. Jimmy Leg is saying, how late are you going to stay up? Aquavite. I'm going to stay up for another... Well, what is it? I'll stay up for another half hour at least. The vPub's going to go for another 25 minutes, half an hour, isn't it? Dan Thompson's bought me a very generous dram. Thank you, Dan. To pay for Jimmy Leg's Vindaloo at Akbar. See you, star. I'll do that for you, Dan. Thank you very much. Cheers. I encourage Jimmy not to choose the Vindaloo before we go round to the Bon Accord. Justin Wan is saying, can't imagine a world whiskey quiz be easy. Don't worry, Justin. We've had the world whiskey session tonight. For the quiz at the end, we're going to move back to Scotch. Rob Smith is saying, wait, there's a quiz. Rob, of course there is, buddy. Of course there is. And Jerry Miller is saying, if only Westland's Outpost range wasn't so overpriced. Love their stuff, but the prices have sent me to Copperworks. Interesting that these dynamics are happening elsewhere. Daniel Williams, you star. My buddy Daniel, how are you keeping? He's bought 5 Aquavite memberships and gifted them out to the community. So 5 of you can take up Daniel's offer and have access to all those wee emojis. You get the wee loyalty barfly too, but all the kind of whiskey themed emojis to colour up the chat, not just the live chat when you're in tonight, but if you're picking this up on the replay. Hopefully I've jumped in and picked up all the housekeeping and timestamps so that you can express view tomorrow or over the weekend. Tyree Kai, so good to see you in. Would love to try some Brazilian whiskey aged in our Amburana casks. I've tried some Amburana beers and they've been great. So Tyree Kai is a writer for Dramface, a fantastic writer, privileged to have him. His technical insight, his expertise is amazing. I think it's the first time, Tyree, I've been able to welcome you in the vPub, and it's brilliant to have you here. I wonder if you've tried this Union Brazilian malt whiskey, because it's pretty different. It's pretty lovely. Falscraft is saying, looking forward to the quiz. Fantastic. Good. Glad you're looking forward to the quiz. I need to bring it in. Need to get it set up. Remember that, I remember if I go back to the very early vPubs, the first ever vPubs that we ever did, it was kind of awkward to bring it to a close at the end. It was just kind of like, okay, well, I've had enough now. I'm tired, or hey, let's just finish it up. It was nice speaking to you. Bye. So I had this idea that we would finish on a quiz at the end. Little did I know that it would be such a divisive thing that there are people out there that, oh, with the quiz, no, I'm out of here. So that's a stupid idea. And bye, I'm done. And that's fine. That's why I put it at the end. Or one of the reasons that it stayed at the end, let's say. But so many people loved the quiz to the point that if I removed the quiz now, if I get rid of the quiz today, there would be mutiny in the vPub, believe me. Peter Lee's bought me a massive dram. What are you doing, Peter? I'll see you soon. Please look after Denise at Legfest. Are you not going to be there, Peter? I won't be available until after my work. I know it's not much, but can you get around for Jimmy Leg at the Bonaccord? Peter, of course. Jimmy Leg will not be short of whiskey at the Bonaccord. And neither will you, my friend, when you do finally finish your shift on Saturday the 30th. Peter, thank you very much, my friend Slanshire. Is that Cardrona? Taste it. I've put water in it too. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone, settle in for the quiz at the end. Here we go. Let's pull this up. Let's try if we can do that. Tends to be a wee bit better. I don't know. It's up. It's 6.5 a dozen, I think. Well, Yoichi is saying vPub without a quiz is like world without whiskey. Hallelujah. Well, Yoichi, good to see you. Gary Carew is saying, we miss Is It a Speyside? I miss it too. I miss it too. But you know what I've got to do? I've got to pay my debts. I've got the coins in. I just need to sit down one day, do all the admin, pack them up and ship them out. If Helen Widdowson's in, she'll be spitting teeth at me. I need to sit down and do that and catch up, see how many coins I've got left and decide what I want to do. The difficulty with Is It a Speyside was all that setting up the guest and how much time it took to do the tech checks and then having somebody sitting up and having the anxiety, having somebody sitting in the background and everything. But it was fun, wasn't it? And it did kind of break down that fourth wall thing and make everyone realize how much of a community thing this is that we're having here, enjoying here. Okay, everyone, good luck with the quiz. It will be a wee bit of a challenge tonight. Question 1. Chivas Brothers release a series called the Distillery Reserve Collection. It's a wee bit like their 50cl take on Flora and Fauna, I would say, only available through their visitor centres. Anyway, they released the Distillery Reserve Collection. Which of these is available to buy from their visitor centres under this Distillery Reserve Collection label? A. Dalmonic. They sell Dalmonic through that label. B. Breval. They sell their Breval through that label. Or C. Macduff. They sell their Macduff through that label. Which of those is available through Chivas Brothers Distillery Reserve Collection? Should be a banana skin in here tonight, potentially. New game proposal. Is it a new distilleries product? Good one, Greg. Let me know the structure. How does it play? Helen is laughing at me because of the coins, right? Greg's Whiskey Guide. Oh, sorry, I picked it up just as it drops back in again. I picked up your chat, Greg. Molasses is saying, kill me now. Dogs Have No Uncles is saying B. Justin Wan saying B. Bruce Bernard is saying B. Andy Cross is saying B. Not many people are suggesting A. 1 or 2 say C. Malt Mariners, good to see you in, Malt Mariners. Is saying A. Whiskey with Molly Bennett is saying A and B. Aye, and he's nailed it. Sometimes at the start I give you all a freebie, but not tonight. However, 2 out of 3 were correct. Macduff is owned by Dewar's, so they cannot be sold through the Chivas Brothers Pernod Ricard distilleries. So it had to be either Dalmonic or Breval. The first ever Dalmonic released was actually through this Distillery Reserve Collection. I think it went out about 50, 55 quid or something like that. But there you go. If you answered A or B, you're off to a good start. And if you plumped for C, Macduff, which is a distillery not even owned by Pernod Ricard Chivas Brothers, you're still on 0. But don't worry. Nobody leaves the vPub with 0. Question 2. Which of these distilleries is located in the whiskey capital of the world? Dufton in Speyside. There was a time, of course, that Campbelltown was the whisky capital of the world with over 30 distilleries in one town. Quite incredible. But they often talk about Dufton being 7 stills built on 7 hills or something like that. Quite an interesting collection or concentration of distilleries up there in Speyside. But I'm looking for, you tell me which of these are in Dufton. A, Glendullan, B, Glenord, or C, Glenspey. Which of those 3 distilleries are located in the town of Dufton? I'm realising now that Peter Lee and Jimmy Legg have already met, and they're interested to meet each other again, which is kind of cool. Tyree Kai thinks A. Daniel Williams thinks A. Most of the crowd are saying A. I've done the Dufton Distilleries walk twice, says Andrew Butler. You're definitely a channel elder, and probably the single most one of the single most time served, knowledgeable folks in the chat, Andrew. It's always great to have you in participating. Whiskey with Molly thinks A. George McLeod thinks A. And your Uncle Vanya thinks A. Fernando's in as well. Good to see you, Fernando, your Uncle Vanya, and George McLeod. And Gary Carew also thinks A. I can tell you, you're all absolutely right. Glenord is actually in the Highlands, and Glenspey is out in Rothes, I think. Rothes. Glendullan is absolutely alongside Balvenie, Glenfiddich, Mortlach, and all the other distilleries in Dufton. Question 3. The only generally available official release from Glenspey is from the Flora and Fauna series. But what age statement does it bear? Glenspey, you can only drink it as a Flora and Fauna release at 43%. Occasionally you do see Glenspey from Indies, but it's one of the most under the radar distilleries. But the Flora and Fauna official release, what age statement does it have? A, Glenspey is a 10-year-old. B, Glenspey is a 12-year-old. Or C, Glenspey is a 14-year-old. Fernando's waving. Rob Smith is suggesting a banana skin. There is a banana skin up here tonight as well, but I just think it's one of those because it's a Flora and Fauna. Not everybody gets it everywhere. It's going to be one of those tricky ones. This is when the vPub works well, because if you don't know and you can say, wait a minute, Roy, this isn't fair. I'm in Brazil. I get Union whiskey. I don't get Flora and Faunas. Then you can lean on your buddies in the lounge. Hopefully, if they're right. Absolutely everybody thinks that Glenspey, Flora and Fauna is a 12-year-old, and you've all kicked it out the park like the superstars and knowledgeable whiskey folk that you are. I don't know how many of you actually have a Glenspey 12-year-old on yourself, maybe quite a few of you. I've got some here, but it's nearly dead. And I doubt I'll be replacing it for various reasons that I've already shared and touched upon tonight. Justin Wan is saying, I'll bet that Flora and Fauna reaches Brazil. 12 years old for Glenspey. Question 4. If we assume the typical size for a cask, which of these is the largest? A, a hogshead, B, a barrique, or C, a barrel? And by a barrel, I'm talking about an ASB, an American Standard barrel. Peter Lee is saying G&M has Glenspey at times. And hopefully G&M present it better than the official distillery release, Peter. Never had a G&M Glenspey. I wonder what the distillery character of Glenspey is. I only know it through the Flora and Fauna. So if we assume the typical size for a barrel or for a cask, so let's say cask is the generic term, of course, which of these would typically be the biggest? A hogshead, B, a barrique, or C, a barrel? Absolutely kicked out of the park, everybody. Desi Vleeland is in. Good to see you, Desi. A wee bird tells me that you're potentially coming to Scotland for one of the events this year. Are you? Are you coming? And Daniel Williams is here too. Good to see you. And Peter Box as well. Fantastic to see that I can see that you are Peter Box. Absolutely spot on. It is a hogshead. Barrique would typically be 225 litres. An American barrel would typically be 200 litres. I know that you guys measure it in gallons. But a hogshead would be closer to 250 litres. It's midnight. I'm in the vPub. This is very weird, Aquavitae. Jimmy, if you're flagging, if you're feeling a wee bit tired, carry yourself off for a good night's rest and look forward to your time over the next few days, buddy. Question 5. I'm going to show you a picture of a warehouse here. You can see that this is quite a unique warehouse, quite a different warehouse, quite a distinctive warehouse. And I'm going to ask you, where is this warehouse by region? Is this warehouse A, in the Highlands, B, in the Lowlands, or C, on Isla? Whiskey with Molly saying A, a barrique is 250 to 300 litres. A barrique is typically 225 litres. If you believe or have found evidence to suggest 250 to 300 litres for a barrique, take the point, Ben. You know the rules of the vPub. Just you have it, buddy, and run away with it. And you're suggesting Isla Warehouse for this one. Wild Yerky is saying that's my house. Don't you wish? Sugar Kitty is saying, hey, it's only 1900 in the East. It's midnight where we are, Sugar Kitty, but you're at 7 o'clock at night. Peter Lee saying the older connoisseur choice, bottled at 46%. It's like cut grass, he's saying. So a grassy malt. Yeah, I can go with that. Daniel Williams is asking Graham Young if this is Deanston. So what region would that be if it was? My basement, all welcome, says George McLeod. I can tell you that you are indeed spot on looking at Deanston. Look at the ceilings there. The reason that those ceilings are shaped like that was back in the days it was a cotton mill, was to take all the humidity out of the room and condense it down into the pillars and the walls. Quite gross when you think about it from a kind of HR perspective. But this is Deanston's maturation warehouse, and of course Deanston is a Southern Highland distillery. So if you answered A, give yourself a point. We're halfway through now. How are we getting on? Peter Box on 5, Jerry Miller on 5. I've been there, says Jerry Miller. Jimmy Jazz as well. Justin Wan. It's a cross between Jimmy Jazz and Justin Wan. Tony Nelson, you're coming across, Tony. That's incredible that you're coming. 5 out of 5 for Tony. Andrew Butler on 5. Jimmy Legs slipped up at some point. He's on a 4, as well as Bruce Bernard as well. Dogs of No Uncles, Colin on 5, and Nicholas on 5. Loads and loads of people enjoying a 5 out of 5. High scoring so far. It's going to get tougher for the way home. Question 6. Which of these popular distilleries feature their own on-site bottling hall? Been there with you, Aquavite, says Hellswood. Which of these distilleries feature their own on-site bottling hall? A, Brooklady has an on-site bottling hall. B, Springbank has an on-site bottling hall. Or C, Kilchoman has an on-site bottling hall. Imagine the flexibility that this brings. That's me going back to the Lark. Quite interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, but it's the Miyagikyo tonight is it's probably the most delicate one in the lineup. Fernando's saying D, all of them. Nicholas is saying B, C, while Jerky is saying B. The only one I haven't been to is B, says Whiskey with Molly. And Desi is saying B, Andy Cross, B. Hoyt Hemphill is in. Good to see you, Hoyt, suggesting B. I can tell you that B, yes. Springbank does have its own bottling hall. So does Brooklady, and so does Kilchoman. It's a freebie. You're all not leaving without... Listen, you're all knowledgeable folk. Nobody's going to get 0 out of 0. But I think it's interesting. There are 5 distilleries in Scotland that have their own bottling hall. I've been there and I've touched a Springbank. I've been at Kilchoman. I've not seen Brooklady's, but the flexibility that it gives them, the ability to turn around their own product. I'm forgetting what the other one was, but it's Rassi is the other one. And the other one's going to need to come to me a wee bit later. Anyway, freebie for you all as we move into question 7. Moynia, Bunnahabhain's peated spirit, was first available to buy as an official release in which year? So Bunnahabhain has typically always been, let's say, an unpeated or certainly a very, very lightly, maximum 2 to 3 ppm. That's been Bunnahabhain in its history. But in much more recent times, Moynia came on the scene, a heavily peated take on Bunnahabhain. What year was it first available as an official release? Was it A, 2004, B, 2010, or C, 2017? Jimmy Legacy and only 5. Amazing. Yeah, with their own. Well, it's because of these centralized things. That's what I talked about with Cardrona. Imagine the infrastructure that's built up around Scotch whisky with centralized maltings and centralized bottling and centralized warehousing and centralized, not just warehousing for maturation, but centralized warehousing for finished bottled goods and stocks as well, and dry goods and everything. You know, a lot of the distilleries, they don't even take it away from the distillery in cask. They disgorge and take it away from the distillery sometimes in tanker. I mean, most of the vatting tends to be done at the bottling hall, but new make spirit can be tankered away from the distillery too. So much of the infrastructure these days in Scotland is centralised. It's going to be interesting to see how all of these kind of growing whiskey producing countries all over the world develop that same infrastructure, whether they all keep things in-house and, you know, hands-on, or whether they centralise. This is going to trip up a lot of people. A lot of people are thinking about the 60.1% 2017 release of the Moynia Oloroso, which was just lights out. We never tasted Bunnahabhain like it. I'd still put it up there with the best Bunnahabhain I've ever had. Very, very extreme. If we talk about balance, it was that peat and sherry thing. But interestingly, the first ever Moynia release was made in 1997 and released for Fashil in 2004. And here's a picture of the very cute but odd bottle. This is Bunnahabhain Moynia. I took this picture from Whiskey Base. I hope they don't mind. Bunnahabhain Moynia, one of 310 bottles from 2004. Peated Bunnahabhain. Incredible, right? Incredible. 7 out of 7 for Sugar Kitty. 7 out of 7 for Tony Nelson. Bugger, says Helen Switz as she strips up, and only a 6 out of 7. 7 out of 7 for Andrew Butler. Superb, Andrew. See who's still hanging on. Just in time, Falscraft Klaus on 7. Jimmy Jazz on a 7. Rick Johnson on a 6. Raging. Unfortunate. Rick, I'm so sorry. Hang on. It's still a great score. Okay, question 8. Which of these Highland tea distilleries is the youngest? I want to know the youngest, okay? A, Tomintoul, B, Tullibardine, or C, Tomatin? A lot of distilleries appeared in the 20th century. Not all of the Scottish distilleries can suggest that they were founded in the 18th and 19th centuries. Malt Marins are saying it's just a hell of a great whiskey cocktail, a mix of PX Sherry and Lafroig, and then the same with Port Charlotte 10. It was so good. Brilliant. Brilliant. Paul Gibbs is saying B in the 60s. I can tell you, Paul, spot on. Tullibardine was in 1965. 1965. A lot of you would be looking at Tomintoul there and thinking that it's younger, but Tomintoul is a Speyside distillery, which is why the banana skin was there. So if any of you answered A, you've slipped up on the banana skin. I'm looking for Highland tea distilleries. Tomintoul is in Speyside. Tomatin, of course, is 1897 or something, right? Tullibardine, spot on, Paul Gibbs. Good to have you in, buddy. B is the correct one here. Oh my God, says Justin Wan. 8 out of 8 for Falsgraf. From now on, I'll be happy. So it doesn't matter what happens from here on in, Klaus, you're happy. Fantastic. Just exactly what we like. Rob Smith looks like he slipped up in the banana skin. And Jimmy Legacy saying that was very tricky too, Aquaviti. Need to read the questions. I'm asking for Highland distilleries, and I'm literally putting the banana skin up there to remind you. Question 9. One of these special releases from Knockdo, otherwise known as Anok, is completely made up. I made it up. You just need to pick the one I've made up. A. Anok Tushkar. B. Anok Flauter or Fluchter, depending on your pronunciation. Or C. Anok Gara. Which of those have I made up? Anok release a lot of peated releases, and they like to talk about things that associate with the whiskey production or the peat, let's say, harvesting with the whiskey. So they have these names, these Gaelic names. A. Tushkar, B. Flauter, or C. Gara. Dogs Have No Uncles is suggesting D, that I made all of them up. Red Sox Whiskey Bear Andrews in. Good to see you, buddy. Ben Demon Hunter is saying, oh my goodness, here we go. Craig G is saying, I was really hoping for whiskey. McWhiskerson was an option. And Whiskey Boy is saying he remembers a Flochter, so okay. And Donald Rance is suggesting that it's C, he believes. I'll go with the accent C, says Rick Johnson. I can tell you that Tushkar and Flauter are both implements used in the cutting and preparation of peat, but C is Gaelic for garden, and it has never been an Anok release. Not yet, at least. So C is the answer there. So what kind of shape are we in before we go into the deliberately awkward and obtuse asshat question at the end? 7 out of 9. He's saying, and C is right. 7 out of 9 for Jimmy Legg. Tony Nelson also on a 7 out of 9. Crashed and burning on the tail end. Not at all. I think that's perfectly acceptable scoring right there from you two guys. Brilliant stuff. Peter Box on an 8 out of 9. There are some 9 out of 9s coming in from Jimmy Jazz, from Falsgraf. He's still holding it together. Daniel Williams on a 9 out of 9 as well. Incredible. Need to catch these. Need to catch the 9s. Andrew Butler, fingers crossed on a 9 out of 9. Terrific stuff. Here comes the asshat at the end. I know how cruel these asshat questions are. So many of you on 9 out of 9s. And then suddenly the asshat comes along and just kills you. So let's see if that happens tonight. Good luck to all you 9 out of 9ers, says Paul Gibbs. Terrific sentiment, buddy. Here we go. Question 10. Brora opened its doors once more in 2021. So if we take the 2 years since and then add them to the number of years it was operating as Brora previously, originally operated as Brora, how many years in total do we have? So we take the 2 years that Brora has been operational in the 21st century, and then I want you to add it to the amount of operational years it originally had in the 20th century. What number do you come up with? Is it about the same as the number of A, the years that Wolfburn has been operational? B, the years of maturation for the oldest Kilchoman Fashil release so far? Or C, the amount of years that Glengyle Distillery was silent in the 20th century? Add the amount of years that Brora was operational in the 20th century to the amount of years that Brora has been operational in the 21st century, and then match it to A, B, or C. A, Wolfburn has been operational for how many years? B, how many years is Kilchoman's oldest Fashil release to date? And C, how many years was Glengyle Distillery, famously making Kilkerran, silent, in the 20th century? Your Uncle Vanya is saying, okay, no. I'm stepping out here and I'll be back for the answers. This is the asshat. This is what the 10th question is. Dave Barnes is saying, leave it out. Good grief, Roy. Molasses is saying, be an 8 out of 9. Sour takes the pressure off. It does, Mike, doesn't it? It's brilliant. So if you're on a 9 out of 9 and you're looking at this, I have suddenly made an enemy, haven't I? This is going to upset a lot of people. It's going to upset a lot of people. I'm not going to ask our 9 out of 9ers to shout their thing. It's up to them. B for Brian, says Brian Cabayas. perfect. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, Justin Wan, you know, he just reviewed the new Brora 50. It's insane. I don't know who you're talking about, Greg, there. I did not get to go anywhere near a Brora 50-year-old. It would not be for me. George McLeod is saying, A for giggles, no sweat on the brow. Perfect, George. I can tell you that Wolfburn has been operational for 10 years. The oldest fish ale release from Kilhoman is 16 years. And Glengyle Distillery was silent in the 20th century for 75 years. Brora was operational for 2 years this century and 8 years from 1975 to 1983 in the 20th century, which is a total of somewhere around just over 10 years. Brora was Clynelish up until 1975. Actually, it was known as Clynelish 2, and it was running parallel to the newly built Clynelish No. 1 facility up until the point that they realised they had to give it a different name, and they named it after the town that it's in, or very, very on the outskirts of. So Brora was called Brora in 1975. Only 8 years of operation before it closed, which is a total of 10. Quite an incredible thing for one of the most legendary malt whiskies out there in the planet. Did we hang on to our 10 out of 10s? How we do? 9 out of 10 for Nicholas. Brilliant as BMO as well on a 9 out of 10. Terrific, BMO, and good to have you both in. Dogs Have No Uncles on a 7. Wild Jerky on 11 out of 10. I added 4 points for trying. You are very welcome to the Wild Jerky. Perfect. Dave Barnes is saying 9 out of 10. So bloody close. So close, Dave. So close. Please don't judge me. Gino is saying 8. Good for you, Gino. Good to have you in as well, buddy. And Peter Box is on 8. What about the 1968 to 1973 or 1968 to 1975? You mean it was operating as Clynelish 2? 8 out of 10. Helen is celebrating, not too shabby. She's saying for her 8 out of 10. And Desi is on an 8 out of 10, and she's happy too. Fantastic, Desi. I'm hoping to see you soon. And Petrocelli is also on 8. Justin Wan has bought me a dram, saying 7 out of 10. Getting the ass hat right would have made my night, but it wasn't to be. Still great fun. Thank you so much, Justin, for the dram. Thank you, buddy. Cheers. 8 out of 10. Come on. Where are our guys? Where's Andrew Butler? Where's Jimmy Jazz? That will do for me, says Willie Dolier, on an 8 out of 10. Good chat tonight. Thank you very much, Willie Dolier. Brilliant to have you in, buddy. Come on, let's have it. Let's have it. I need to find the Andrews. Where are you, Andrew? Upset, angry. Andrew Butler, 9 out of 10. The ass hat got you, Andrew. I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. And Jimmy Jazz, he's either in here celebrating or he's running around the room in a very happy place. I should have said 9 out of 10, but he's okay. I think the ass hat took the wind out of everyone. Come on, somebody got a 10 out of 10. Did somebody get it? Unfortunately, it looks like only 3 people said A for the ass hat, says Sugar Kitty. You're much more on the ball than I am. Thank you, buddy. And Daniel Williams, right at the dying embers of the night, buys 5 Aquavitae memberships for everybody. So cool. Thank you, Daniel. Sandro is celebrating a 7. Superb to you. Great and fun quiz. Thanks for sharing these great whiskies tonight. And ciao to you. Grazie mille. Sandro, I'll see you next time. No, Rolex is saying, see you Saturday. Looking forward to this year's OSWAs. Terrific stuff. Just remind everybody that goes out at 6 o'clock on Saturday. I call it a 10 out of 10 for my gut feeling. Just got distracted by overthinking. I think that's a brilliant way to look at it. It truly is a Falsgraf. It's take whatever score you want from the vPub quiz at the end. Gino Kumo saying, great vPub and see you, Roy, next week. And Falsgraf is, sorry, I picked up that one. Why does it was really cool to see Phil from. I did a collaboration with Phil last Friday. We talked about a lot of things, and we talked about the OSWAs. And he was running the chat as well. And as he was trying to interact with the chat, as he was going in, and it's what it is you've got the chat locked, you've got it in a place, you're ready to read, but then your mouse touches the chat and it jumps to the latest comments. So you're like, oh, it's really frustrating. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, for the Brora 50-year-old, it was Serge Valentine, Whiskey Fun. Check out the score. Insane too. Really? I don't know. Okay, I'll vicariously enjoy 50-year-old whiskey through Serge. Hellswood is saying, cheers, Roy. See you this Saturday for the OSWAs and for real next weekend. Looking forward to it, Helen. And I'm glad that you are too. Justin Wan is saying, was there a theme? Dying to know. No theme tonight, just a regular vPub quiz at the end. I will tend to suggest and tease out the fact that there's a theme at some point. Great stuff. Rick Johnson is saying, thanks for stretching the boundaries and the conversation, Roy. Another great vPub. Rick, thank you for being here always. Mac1, it looks like a brand new name. You're a barfly. Another great vPub. Thanks. Mac1, wonderful to be able to welcome you in too. So there we have it. Another, I have to say it was busy tonight at the start, especially because when I do these vPubs on things that are not Scotch topics, they tend to be a wee bit kind of, okay, this is the vPub, I'll skip. I was really grateful of the support tonight and the people coming in and support, even when I want to talk about things that are not Scotch, that are not typically our lane. And I'm really grateful to have you kind of just being part of the way that my mind thinks and wanders. I'm not part of the whiskey industry. I'm part of you. I'm part of the community. I'm an enthusiast and I'm an observer. And I'm looking at these things and I'm contemplating, I'm wondering, how can these things continue? How can they work? From the perspective of an enthusiast, somebody who buys and drinks the whiskey rather than who makes and promotes it. On both sides of that fence, our perspectives are tainted and fractured somewhat, and only through vocalizing and communicating can we get to a point that we understand why things are so a wee bit better. I'm going to be very curious to see how they impact the unmistakable, huge scale, forceful, I mean, for a drinker, for an enthusiast, as long as you're open-minded, it's wonderful. But for the whiskey industry globally, it's going to change very, very fast in a very short space of time. Overall, the whiskies I've sipped tonight, if it ends up bringing flavour like this, we're in a good place. I'll raise this glass of the standout whiskey for me tonight. I might even pour a wee bit more of this. This really, neck pour as well, this really delicious. Let's check again. Excellent. Excellent. Japanese whiskey, Miyagikyo. Is it 75 quid's worth? I think so, aye. Until next time, thank you for joining me tonight. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday for the OSWAs, and of course I look forward to seeing you a week from tonight for another vPub. Until then, I'll remind you all, you're very dearly loved. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight. Sláinte.